live right now, and I'll be giving the floor to Brother Jeff and Brother Joshua. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, sure. Sure, no problem, bro. No problem. I think this was Brother Jeff and Brother Joshua just putting, yeah. Yeah, go ahead. When you guys are reading, you guys can put it on the shared screen if you want to put it on your own shared screen. I have enabled shared screen for other people. Yep, go ahead. All right, guys, we're back. Brother Jeff and Brother Joshua are going to take the floor with 1 Samuel chapter 14. Just unmute you guys when you're ready. Just unmute yourselves. Okay. Oh, nice. Got a nice little background there. All right. You guys ready? Huh. It's an interesting one there. It's an interesting website. I've never seen that before. It's kind of cool.
Sorry, I was having trouble on mute.
Oh, no problem. Go ahead. And feel free to use your share screen. Go ahead.
All right. Can y'all see that?
I can see it.
And when a certain day arrived, Jonathan, the son of Shaul, said to the young man that bore his armor, "Come and let us go over to Mesab of the Philistines, that is on the other side yonder."
Oh, share screen is not working right now. It just fizzed out for some reason. I just see the Zoom application on your shared screen, which is weird. Must have glitched or something.
All right, doesn't matter. I'm just gonna go ahead and read.
Yeah, I'll put my share screen on so they can read along. Let's see here. So 1 Samuel. Okay, so 1 Samuel. Just get it there so the viewers can read along here. All right, so here you go, Brother Joshua. Take it away.
And when a certain day arrived, Jonathan, the son of Shaul, said to the young man that bore his armor, "Come and let us go over to Mesab of the Philistines, that is on the other side yonder." But he told not his father. And Shaul sat on the top of the hill under the pomegranate tree that is in Magdon, and there were with him about 600 men. And Ahiah, son of Ahitub, the brother of Jochebed, the son of Phinehas, the son of Eli, the priest of Aluah in Salem, wearing an ephod, and the people knew not that Jonathan was gone. And in the midst of the passage whereby Jonathan sought to pass over to the encampment of the Philistines, there was both a sharp rock on this side and a sharp rock on the other side. The name of the one was Bases, and the name of the other Sinna. The one way northward to one coming to Michmash, and the other way southward to one coming to Gabay. And Jonathan said to the young man that bore his armor, "Come, let us go over to Mesab of these uncircumcised, if Yahweh may do something for us. For Yahweh is not straitened to save by many or by few." And his armor bearer said to him, "Do all that your heart inclines toward. Behold, I am with you. My heart is as your heart." And Jonathan said, "Behold, we will go over to the men, and will come down suddenly upon them. And if they should say thus to us, 'Stand aloof there until we shall send you word,' then we will stand still by ourselves, and will not go up against them. But if they should say thus to us, 'Come up to us,' then we will go up, for Yahweh has delivered them into our hands. This shall be a sign to us." And they both went into Mesab of the Philistines. And the Philistines said, "Behold, the Hebrews are come forth out of their caves, where they had hidden themselves." And the men of Mesab answered Jonathan and his armor bearer and said, "Come up to us, and we will show you a thing." And Jonathan said to his armor bearer, "Come up after me, for Yahweh has delivered them into the hands of Yasharol." And Jonathan went up on his hands and feet, and his armor bearer with him. And they looked on the face of Jonathan, and he smote them, and his armor bearer did smite after him. And the first slaughter which Jonathan and his armor bearer effected was 20 men with darts and slings and pebbles of the field. And there was dismay in the camp and in the field, and all the people in Mesab, and the spoilers were amazed, and they would not act. And the land was terror struck, and there was dismay from Yahweh. And the watchmen of Shaul beheld in Gibeah of Benjamin, and behold, the army was thrown into confusion on every side. And Shaul said to the people with him, Number yourselves now, and see who has gone out from you. And they numbered themselves, and behold, Jonathan and his armor-bearer were not found. And Shaul said to Ahiah, Bring the ephod, for he wore the ephod in that day before Yasharal. And it came to pass, while Shaul was speaking to the priest, that the sound in the camp of the Philistines continued to increase greatly. And Shaul said to the priest, Withdraw your hands. And Shaul went up, and all the people that were with him, and they came to the battle. And behold, every man's sword was against his neighbor, a very great confusion. And the servants who had been before with the Philistines, who had gone up to the army, turned themselves also to be with the Yashuralites who were with Shaul and Jonathan. And all the Yashuralites who were hidden in Mount Ephraim heard also that the Philistines fled, and they also gathered themselves after them to battle. And Yahuwah saved Yashural on that day. And the war passed through Bamath. And all the people with Shaul were about 10,000 men. And the battle extended itself to every city in the Mount Ephraim. And Shaul committed a great trespass of ignorance in that day, and he lays a curse on the people. Sorry, what verse was I in? And Shaul committed a great trespass of ignorance in that day, and he lays a curse on the people, saying, Cursed is the man who shall eat bread before the evening, so I will avenge myself on my enemy. And none of the people tasted bread through all the land was dining, though all the land was dining. And Joel was a wood abounding in swarms of bees on the face of the ground. And the people went into the place of the bees, and behold, they continued speaking. And behold, there was none that put his hand to his mouth, for the people feared the oath of Yahuwah. And Jonathan had not heard when his father adjured the people. And he reached forth the end of the staff that was in his hand, and dipped it into the honeycomb, and returned his hand to his mouth, and his eyes recovered their sight. And one of the people answered and said, Your father solemnly adjured the people, saying, Cursed is the man who shall eat bread today. And the people were very faint. And Jonathan knew it, and said, My father has destroyed the land. See how my eyes have received sight, that I have tasted a little of this honey. Surely if the people had this day eaten freely of the spoils of their enemies which they found, the slaughter among the Philistines would have been greater. And on that day he smote some of the Philistines in Michmash, and the people were very weary. And the people turned to the spoil, and the people took flocks and herds and calves, and slew them on the ground, and the people ate the blood. And it was reported to Shaul, saying, The people have sinned against Yahweh, eating with the blood. And Shaul said, Out of Githaim roll a great stone to me hither. And Shaul said, Disperse yourselves among the people, and tell them to bring hither every one his calf, and every one his sheep, and let them slay it on this, and sin not against Yahuwah in eating with the blood. And the people brought each one that which was in his hand, and they slew there. And Shaul built an altar there to Yahuwah. This was the first altar that Shaul built to Yahuwah. And Shaul said, Let us go down after the Philistines this night, and let us plunder among them till the daybreak. And let us not leave a man among them. And they said, Do all that is good in your sight. And the priest said, Let us draw nigh hither to Aluah. And Shaul inquired of Allah, If I go down after the Philistines, will you deliver them into the hands of Yashral? And he answered him not in that day. And Shaul said, Bring here all the chiefs of Yashral, and know, and see by whom this sin has been committed this day. For as Yahuwah lives, who has saved Yashral, if answer should be against my son Jonathan, he shall surely die. And there is no one that answered out of all the people. And he said to the men of Yashral, You shall be under subjection, and I and Jonathan my son will be under subjection. And the people said to Shaul, Do that which is good in your sight. And Shaul said, O Yahuwah Allah of Yashral, why hast thou not answered your servant this day? Is the iniquity in me or in Jonathan my son? Yahuwah Allah of Yashral, give clear manifestations. And if the lot should declare this, give, I pray you, to your people of Yashral. Give, I pray, set apartness. And Jonathan and Shaul are taken, and the people escaped. It seems like he's completely oblivious to like everything that he's done to Yahuwah to cause him not to answer him.
Yeah, I guess what would we call that? Like willful ignorance or blissful ignorance?
Yes.
Blaming it on everybody else but himself.
Yeah. All right. 42. And Shaul said, cast lots between me and my son Jonathan. Whomsoever Yahweh shall cause to be taken by lot, let him die. And the people said to Shaul, this thing is not to be done. And Shaul prevailed against the people, and they cast lots between him and Jonathan his son, and Jonathan is taken by lot. And Shaul said to Jonathan, tell me what thou hast done. And Jonathan told him and said, I did indeed taste a little honey with the end of my staff that was in my hand, and lo, I am to die. And Shaul said to him, Aluah, do so to me, and more also, thou shalt surely die today. And the people said to Shaul, shall he that has wrought this great salvation in Yashral be put to death this day? Yahuwah, as Yahuwah lives, there shall not fall to the ground one of the hairs of his head, for the people of Aluah have wrought successfully this day. And the people prayed for Jonathan in that day, and he died not. And Shaul went up from following the Philistines, and the Philistines departed to their place. And Shaul received the kingdom by lot. He inherits the office over Yashral. And he fought against all his enemies round about, against Moab, and against the children of Ammon, and against the children of Edom, and against Ethiel, and against the king of Zobah, and against the Philistines. Whithersoever he turned, he was victorious. And he wrought valiantly, and smote Amalek, and rescued Yashral out of the hand of them that trampled on him. And the sons of Shaul were Jonathan, and Jesse, and Melchizedek. And these are the names of his two daughters. The name of the firstborn, Merab, and the name of the second, Michal. And the name of his wife was Akinum, the daughter of Ahimaaz. And the name of his captain of the host was Abner, the son of Ner, son of a kinsman of Shaul. And Kish, the father of Shaul, and Ner, the father of Ebenezer, son of Yamin, son of Abiel. And the war was vehement against the Philistines all the days of Shaul. And when Shaul saw any mighty man and valiant man, then he took him to himself.
Any army? Anybody dressed like an army man is over here? A sword and all that stuff.
And Samuel said to Shaul, chapter 15, and Samuel said to Shaul, Yahuwah sent me to anoint you king over Yashral, and now hear the voice of Yahuwah. Thus says Yahuwah of hosts, now will I take vengeance for what Amalek did to Yashral when he met him in the way as he came up out of Mitzrayim. And now go, and then you shall smite Amalek and hear him and all that belongs to him. That hear him, I'm not sure what that is. I can't find that in any of the other things other than the Septuagint. It doesn't have a strong reference to it. And all that belongs to him. Go ahead. And all that belongs.
Oh, brother Joshua, let me try to see which word are you referring to that there's no strongs. Is it verse 2?
15:3, and you shall go and smite Amalek and Hiram. That word Hiram, I can't find that anywhere in the scripture.
Oh, interesting.
15:3.
Okay. All right, that's a good catch.
And all that belongs to him, and you shall not save anything of him alive, but thou shalt utterly destroy him, and thou shalt devote him and all his to destruction. And you shall spare nothing belonging to him, and you shall slay both man and woman, and infant and suckling, and calf and sheep and camel and donkey. And Shaul summoned the people, and he numbered them in Gilgal, 400,000 regular troops, and Yehuda 30,000 regular troops. And Shaul came to the cities of Amalek, and laid wait in the valley. And Shaul said to the Kenite, go and depart out of the midst of the Amalekites, lest I put you with them. For you dealt mercilessly to the children of Yashral when they went up out of Mitzrayim. So the Kenite departed from the midst of Amalek. So the Kenites were the people that Moshe married into, Jethro and his father-in-law. They're people, according to the Strong's. And Shaul smote Amalek from Eveleth to Shur, fronting Mitzrayim, and he took Agag, the king of Amalek, alive, and he slew all the people and Hiram with the edge of the sword. And Shaul and all the people saved Agag alive, and the best of the flocks, and of the herds, and of the fruits, and of the vineyards, and of all the good things. They would not destroy them, but every worthless and refuse thing they destroyed. They wanted their best life now. And the word of Yahuwah came to Samuel, saying, I have repented that I have made Shaul to be king, for he has turned back from following me, and has not kept my word. And Samuel was grieved and cried to Yahuwah all night. And Samuel rose early and went to meet Yashruel in the morning. And it was told Shaul, saying, Samuel has come to Carmel, and he has raised up help for himself. And he returned his chariot and came down to Gilgal to Shaul. And behold, he was offering up a whole burnt offering to Yahuwah, the chief of the spoils which he brought out of Amalek. And Samuel came to Shaul, and Shaul said to him, Baruch thou of Yahuwah, I have performed all that Yahuwah said. I have performed all that Yahuwah said. And Samuel said, What then is the bleating of this flock in my ears, and the sound of the oxen which I hear? And Shaul said, I have brought them out of Amalek, that which the people preserved, even the best of the sheep and of the cattle, that it might be sacrificed to Yahuwah your Aluah, and the rest have I utterly destroyed. And Samuel said to Shaul, Stay, and I will tell you what Yahuwah has said to me this night. And he said to him, Say on. And Samuel said to Shaul, Are you not little in his eyes, a leader of one of the tribes of Yasharal? And Yahuwah anointed you to be king over Yasharal. And Yahuwah sent you on a journey and said to you, Go and utterly destroy. You shall slay the sinners against me, the Amalekites, and thou shalt war against them until thou have consumed them. And why did you not hearken to the voice of Yahuwah, but did haste to fasten upon the spoils, and did that which was evil in the sight of Yahuwah? And Shaul said to Samuel, Because I listened to the voice of the people, yet I went the way by which Yahuwah sent me, and I brought Agag the king of Amalek, and I destroyed Amalek. So he's saying, I listened to the people, but I still did what you said. But the people took of the spoils, the best flocks and herds of that which was destroyed, to sacrifice before Yahuwah our Aluah in Gilgal. He seems very self-deceived. And Samuel said, Does Yahuwah take pleasure in whole burnt offerings and sacrifices, as in hearing the words of Yahuwah? Behold, obedience is better than a good sacrifice, and hearkening than the fat of rams. For sin is as divination. Idols bring on pain and grief. Because thou hast rejected the word of Yahuwah, Yahuwah also shall reject you from being king over Yasharal. And Shaul said to Samuel, I have sinned in that I have transgressed the word of Yahuwah in your direction, for I have feared the people and I have hearkened to their voice. And now remove, I pray you, my sin, and turn back with me, and I will worship Yahuwah your Aluah. And Samuel said to Shaul, I will not turn back with you, for you have rejected the word of Yahuwah, and Yahuwah will reject you from being king over Yasharal. And Samuel turned his face to depart, and Shaul caught hold of the skirt of his garment and tore it. And Samuel said to him, Yahuwah has rent your kingdom from Yasharal out of your hand this day, and will give it to your neighbor who is better than you. And Yasharal shall be divided to two, and Aluah will not turn nor repent, for he is not as a man to repent. And Shaul said, I have sinned, yet honor me, I pray you, before the elders of Yasharal and before my people, and turn back with me, and I will worship Yahuwah your Aluah. So Samuel turned back after Shaul, and he worshipped Yahuwah. So it's almost like he's saying, I pray you before the elders of Yasharal, yet honor me. It's almost like he's trying to save face before everybody. So Samuel
Yep.
turned. Go ahead.
No, I was just
So-
agreeing with you, bro. I was just gonna say, yep, that's exactly what's happening. He's worried about what man thinks about him rather than what Yahuwah knows about him.
Right. So Samuel turned back after Shaul, and he worshipped Yahuwah. And Samuel said, Bring me Agag, the king of Amalek. And Agag came to him trembling. And Agag said, Is death this bitter? And Samuel said to Agag, As your sword has bereaved women of their children, so shall your mother be made childless among women. And Samuel slew Agag before Yahuwah in Gilgal. And Samuel departed to Ramathaim, and Shaul went up to his house at Gibeah. And Samuel did not see Shaul again till the day of his death. For Samuel mourned after Shaul, and Yahuwah repented that he had made Shaul king over Yasharal. Chapter 16. How far are we going to again?
Let's see. You are you and Jeff are to do from 14 to 25. So
Okay.
at some point, if you want, you can switch with Jeff after you read 5 chapters, and he could do, I guess, the other 6 or something like that.
Gotcha.
There's an interesting cross reference though I saw that I'd never noticed before. It was in 14. At the end of 14, it says, and there was fierce fighting against the Pelishites all the days of Shaul. And when Shaul saw a mighty man or any brave man, he took him for himself. That's a reference back to 1 Samuel 8:11, when Yahuwah's warning. He says, this is the ruling of the sovereign who reigns over you. He shall take your sons and appoint them for his own chariots and to be his horsemen, and they shall run before his chariots. So he's saying right now, this is what's going to happen if you have a king over you. He's going to take from your sons and daughters. And we see Saul picking any brave and mighty man he chooses for his own army.
Okay.
Great connection.
Chapter 16. And Yahuwah said to Samuel, how long dost thou mourn for Shaul, whereas I have rejected him from reigning over Yashruel? Fill your horn with oil and come. I will send you to Jesse, to Bethlehem, for I have seen among his sons a king for me. And Samuel said, how can I go, whereas Shaul will hear of it and slay me? And Yahuwah said, take a heifer in your hand, and thou shalt say, I am come to sacrifice to Yahuwah. And you shall call Jesse, and says, you shall call Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will make known to you what you shall do. And you shall anoint him, whom I shall mention to you. And Samuel did all that Yahuwah told him, and he came to Bethlehem. And the elders of the city were amazed at meeting him, and said, dost thou come peaceably, thou seer? And he said, peaceably. I am come to sacrifice to Yahuwah. Sanctify yourselves and rejoice with me this day. And he sanctified Jesse and his sons, and he called them to the sacrifice. And it came to pass when they came in that he saw Aholiab, and he said, surely Yahuwah's anointed is before him. But Yahuwah said to Samuel, look not on his appearance, nor on his stature, for I have rejected him. For Allah sees not as man looks, for man looks at the outward appearance, but Allah looks at the heart. And Jesse called Aminadab, and he passed before Samuel. And he said, neither has Allah chosen this one. And Jesse caused Sama to pass by, and he said, neither has Allah chosen this one. And Jesse called his 7 sons to pass before Samuel. And Samuel said, Yahuwah has not chosen these. And Samuel said to Jesse, hast thou no more sons? And Jesse said, yet a little one. Behold, he tends the flock. And Samuel said to Jesse, send and fetch him, for we may not sit down till he comes. And he sent and fetched him, and he was ruddy with beauty of eyes, and very goodly to behold. And Yahuwah said to Samuel, arise and anoint Daoud, for he is good. And Samuel took the horn of oil, and anointed him in the midst of his brethren. And the Ruach of Yahuwah came upon Daoud from that day forward. And Samuel arose and departed to Armathaim. And the Ruach of Yahuwah departed from Shaul, and an evil Ruach from Yahuwah tormented him. And Shaul's servant said to him, behold now, an evil Ruach from Yahuwah torments you. Let now your servant speak before you, and let them seek for our master a man skilled to play on the harp. And it shall come to pass when an evil Ruach comes upon you, and he shall play on his harp, that you should be well, and he shall refresh you. And Shaul said to his servants, look now out for me a skillful player, and bring him to me. And one of his servants answered and said, behold, I have seen a son of Jesse, the Bethlehemite, and he understands playing on the harp. And the man is prudent, and a warrior, and wise in speech, and the man is handsome, and Yahuwah is with him. And Shaul sent messengers to Jesse, saying, send to me your son Daoud, who is with your flock. And Jesse took a homer of bread, and a bottle of wine, and 1 kid of the goats, and sent them by the hand of his son Daoud to Shaul. And Daoud went in to Shaul and stood before him, and he loved him greatly, and he became his armor bearer. And Shaul sent to Jesse, saying, let Daoud, I pray you, stand before me, for he has found grace in my eyes. And it came to pass when the evil Ruach was upon Shaul, that Daoud took his harp and played with his hand, and Shaul was refreshed, and it was well with him, and the evil Ruach departed from him. think it's this one. All right, so chapter 17. So this one has a lot of things that say absent from the manuscript, but I went through them, and everything that's added here in the Masoretic is just ridiculous. It's not even supposed to be there. It makes no sense that it's there, and it actually makes the story like you can't follow along with it. So this is actually correct right here. All these verses that are taken out or that are missing in the Septuagint.
That's a very good point, Brother Joshua. That makes sense. So there's certain things added in that would make it confusing, make it double-minded in a way where
17:1, and the Philistines gathered their armies to battle and gathered themselves to Succoth of Yehuda and encamped between Succoth and Azekah Ephraim. And Shaul and the men of Yashral gathered together, and they encamped in the valley and set the battle in array against the Philistines. And the Philistines stand on the mountain on one side, and Yashral stands in the mountain on the other side, and the valley was between them. And there went forth a mighty man out of the army of the Philistines, Goliath by name, out of Gath. His height was 4 cubits, and his span different than the Masoretic says 6 cubits. Not big.
yeah. So my mom's the NIV sides with the Masoretic there, 9 feet tall. I remember watching a video. I think it was the video you might have sent me a while ago, Brother Joshua, about the Septuagint versus the Masoretic on certain differences. And the guy said, according to the Septuagint, Goliath would have been a very small giant, 7 feet. Yep, go ahead.
No, I was laughing.
Yeah, because according to the Septuagint, he's a really small guy. He ain't even that big of a giant. He's like 7 feet tall compared to like 9 feet tall of the Masoretic, according to modern translators like the NIV.
Right. Interesting. Verse 5, and he had a helmet upon his head, and he wore a breastplate of chain armor, and the weight of his breastplate was 5,000 shekels of brass and iron, and greaves of brass were upon his legs, and a brazen target was between his shoulders, and the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and the spear's head was formed of 600 shekels of iron, and his armor bearer went before him. And he stood and cried to the army of Yashral and said to them, why are you come forth to set yourselves in battle array against us? Am not I a Philistine? And you Hebrews of Shaul, choose for yourselves a man, and let him come down to me. And if he shall be able to fight against me, and shall smite me, then will we be your servants. But if I should prevail and smite him, he shall be our servants and serve us. And if the Philistines said, behold, I have defied the armies of Yashral this very day, give me a man, and we will both of us fight in single combat. And Shaul and all Yashral heard these words of the Philistine, and they were dismayed and greatly terrified. Oh, that's ridiculous how much they've added in here.
Yeah, that's a lot of scrolling.
What's funny is this again makes no sense to add these verses too. They're like almost like retelling something. It's weird. It's like, let me see here. What's the first verse that's not in the Septuagint here? Talks about, it gives the whole retelling of David and being the son of the Ephrathite. I mean, we already know that from the past chapter.
Yeah, it's very weird. And Daud said to Shaul, let not, I pray you, the heart of my master be dejected within him. Verse 32. Your servant will go and fight with the Philistine. And Shaul said to Daud, you will not in any wise be able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are a mere youth, and he a man of war from his youth. And Daud said to Shaul, your servant was tending the flock for his father, and when a lion came and a she-bear, it's interesting, it's a she-bear, it's this bear, and took a sheep out of the flock, then I went forth after him and smote him, and drew out of his mouth. And as he rose up against me, then I caught hold of his throat and smote him and slew him. Your servant smote both the lion and the bear, and the uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them. Shall I not go and smite him and remove this day?
I'm sorry. I have a question. What's the difference in smote and slew? Because it
Same
said
thing. What smoke's hit, slow is killed. Slew is killed. Smoke can be hit or
Like strike down, Sister Zakai. I guess the best way to describe it's slew means kill someone, like Brother Jeff said, and smoke means you could strike someone without killing them. I guess like hurting them. You
I'm just
smoke.
trying to understand because it said he smote him and slew him.
So I guess he struck him down. He struck him, then he slew him. I guess the best way to describe that. To
Okay,
explain
thank you.
that. Yeah, no problem, sis.
Your servant smote both the lion and the bear, and the uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them. Shall I not go and smite him and remove this day a reproach from Yashral? For who is this uncircumcised one who has defied the army of the living Allah? Yahuwah, who delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this uncircumcised Philistine. And Shaul said to David, Go, and Yahuwah shall be with you. And Shaul clothed Daud with a military coat and put his brazen helmet on his head, and he girded Daud with his sword over his coat, and he made trial walking once and again. And Daud said to Shaul, I shall not be able to go with you. I should not be able to go with these, for I have not proved them. So they removed them from him, and he took his word this weird sometimes. And he took his staff in his hand, and he chose for himself 5 smooth stones out of the brook, and put them in the shepherd's scrip which he had for his store. And his sling was in his hand, and he approached the Philistine. And Goliath saw Daud and despised him, for he was a lad and ruddy with a fair countenance. And the Philistine said to Daud, Am I as the dog that thou comest against me with a staff and stones? And the Philistines cursed Daud by his mighty ones. And the Philistine said to Daud, Come to me, and I will give you flesh. I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and to the beasts of the earth. And Daud said to the Philistine, You come to me with sword and with spear and with shield, but I come to you in the name of Yahuwah Allah of hosts of the army of Yashral, which you have defied this day. And Yahuwah shall deliver you this day into my hand, and I will slay you, and take away your head from off you. And I will give your limbs and the limbs of the army of the Philistines this day to the birds of the sky and to the wild beasts of the earth. And all the earth shall know that there is an Allah Yashral. And all this assembly shall know that Yahuwah delivers not by sword or spear, for the battle is Yahuwah's, and Yahuwah will deliver you into our hands. And the Philistine arose and went to meet Daud. And Daud stretched out his hand to his scrip and took thence a stone and slang it, and smote the Philistine on his forehead. And the stone penetrated through the helmet into his forehead, and he fell upon his face to the ground. And Daud ran and stood upon him and took his sword and slew him and cut his head. And the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, and they fled. And the men of Yashral and Yehuda arose and shouted and pursued them as far as the entrance to Gath and as far as the gate of Ascalon. And the slain men of the Philistines fell in the way of the gates, both to Gath and to Ekron. And the men of Yashral returned from pursuing after the Philistines, and they destroyed their camp. And Daud took the hand of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem and put his armor in his tent. So, just for example, for those watching, the Septuagint ends in verse 54, but the Masoretic continues on to 55, and it gives the description of Shaul, basically for instance, and when Shaul saw Daud go forth against the Philistine, he said unto Abner, the captain of the host, Abner, whose son is this youth? And Abner said, As thy soul lives, O king, I cannot tell. So he's asking, who is this guy? But Shaul already knows who he is, because Daud was playing the harp for him.
And he's wearing his armor, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's wearing his armor and carrying his sword.
Where did this come from, man?
That's the problem with the Masoretic, as I've been learning.
They're adding stuff to put a different narrative. I think even with the going back to the Goliath thing, they're trying to make it look David's this mighty guy because he beat a 9-foot giant. When they try to put the focus on David when it's really Yahuwah actually doing the fighting for David, and that's kind of how I look at that. Why they would want to lie about how big Goliath is, I guess, to make it look like a greater feat. I don't know. It's very weird. It's like why they would add 2 or how many more feet versus
says 3 meters.
yeah. But what I'm saying, Mom, is in the Septuagint is a completely different height.
Mhm.
It's a completely. It's like they're adding a couple of feet to make it look.
All right. So verse chapter 18. I'm just gonna keep reading from the Septuagint, just to be safe. I hadn't gone farther than this.
Oh yeah, I also wanted to mention too, just for those that those are curious, the story about him being delivered from out of the mouth of the lion. I actually found that story is paralleled in Psalms 151 from the Septuagint. Just thought I would put that out there. So you can actually find that story in Psalms 151 of the Breton Septuagint. So
Okay. Chapter 18. Septuagint starts in verse 6. And there came out women and dances to meet Daoud out of all the cities of Yasharal with timbrels and with rejoicing and with cymbals. And the women began and said, Shaul has smitten his thousands and Daoud his 10,000s. Okay. Thousands. Okay, that's not the verse that I was looking for. And it seemed evil in the eyes of Shaul concerning this matter, and he said to Daoud, they have given 10,000s, and to me they have given thousands. And Shaul was alarmed on account of Daoud, verse 12. And he removed him from him, and he made him a captain of 1,000 for himself, and he went out and came in before the people. And Daoud was prudent in all his ways, and Yahuwah was with him. And Shaul saw that he was very wise, and he was afraid of him. And all Yashral and Yehuda loved Daoud, because he came in and went out before the people. And Michal, the daughter of Shaul, loved Daoud, and it was told Shaul. And the thing, I want to stop right here, real quick. This verse 15. And Shaul saw that he was very wise, and he was afraid of him. So we're seeing that, like, Shaul is very alarmed of Daoud. He's very afraid of him. Yet he continues to go after him and try to kill him later on. So it just shows you that as we come into this walk, and as we grow closer to Yahuwah and Yahusha, the enemy is only going to increase, his attacks against us. He's not going to decrease. And you see that just in Shaul, like, growing worse and worse, trying to kill David. And all Yashral and Yehuda loved Daoud, because he came in and went out before the people. And Michal, the daughter of Shaul, loved Daoud, and it was told Shaul, and the thing was pleasing in his eyes. And Shaul said, I will give her to him, and she shall be a stumbling block to him. Now the hand of the Philistines was against Shaul. And Shaul charged his servants, saying, Speak you privately to Daoud, saying, Behold, the king delights in you, and all his servants love you, and do thou become the king's son-in-law. And the servants of Shaul spoke these words in the ears of Daoud, and Daoud said, Is it a light thing in your eyes to become son-in-law to the king, whereas I, an humble man, am not honorable? And the servants of Shaul reported to him according to these words, which Daoud spoke. And Shaul said, Thus you shall speak to Daoud. The king wants no gift, but 100 foreskins of the Philistines to avenge himself on the king's enemies. Now Shaul thought to cast him into the hands of the Philistines. And the servants of Shaul report these words to Daoud, and Daoud was well pleased to become the son-in-law to the king. And Daoud arose and went, he and his men, and smote among the Philistines 100 men. And he brought their foreskins, and he becomes the king's son-in-law. So this is actually changed in the Masoretic. The Masoretic, both the Septuagint and the Masoretic show requires 100 foreskins. The Septuagint, he gets the 100 foreskins, but in the Masoretic, he gets 200, almost kind of like he's boasting in a way, like, you know.
Yeah, like trying to prove himself. Like, yeah, I see where you're going. Where he's trying to prove himself, he's trying to do more than what he was required to.
Right.
It changes it, but
Yeah.
Why the foreskins?
it changes it.
I don't know. Yahuwah sent an evil spirit a couple of chapters ago, so I'm guessing this is the evil spirit telling him to do something like that.
Conversion.
I was not expecting that. Like, I was kind of caught off guard a bit when it was, foreskins and to that amount. Like, I was like, whoa.
Well, there seems to be an importance placed on circumcision and
Right.
conversion,
Yes.
and I almost wonder if it's a join us or die kind of mentality.
That's
I don't know. I
crazy.
can't say for sure, but they seem to have a malicious intent when they take the foreskins off of certain people, and it's not always out of a true conversion,
Right. Crazy.
And Shaul saw that Yahuwah was with Daud, and that all Yashua loved him, and he was yet more afraid of Daud. And Shaul spoke to Jonathan his son and to all his servants to slay Daud. I'm not reading the things that are in the Masoretic just to be safe. And Jonathan, Shaul's son, loved Daud much, and Jonathan told Daud, saying, Shaul seeks to kill you. Take heed to yourself, therefore, tomorrow morning, and hide yourself, and dwell in secret. And I will go forth and stand near my father in the field where you shall be, and I will speak concerning you to my father. And I will see what his answer may be, and I will tell you. And Jonathan spoke favorably concerning Daud to Shaul his father, and said to him, Let not the king sin against your servant Daud, for he has not sinned against you, and his deeds very good. And he put his life in his hand, and smote the Philistine, and Yahweh wrought a great deliverance. And all Yashrael saw, and rejoined, Why then do you sin against innocent blood, to slay Daud without a cause? And Shaul hearkened to the voice of Jonathan, and Shaul swore, saying, As Yahweh lives, he shall not die. And Jonathan called Daud and told him all these words. And Jonathan brought Daud into Shaul, and he was before him as in former times. And there was again war against Shaul, and Daud did valiantly and fought against the Philistines, and smote them with a very great slaughter, and they fled from before him. And an evil ruach from Eloah was upon Shaul, and he was resting in his house, and a spear in his hand. And Daud was playing on the harp with his hands. And Shaul sought to smite Daud with his spear. And Daud withdrew from the presence of Shaul, and he drove the spear into the wall, and Daud retreated and escaped. And it came to pass in that night that Shaul sent messengers to the house of Daud to watch him, in order to slay him in the morning. And Michal, Daud's wife, told him, saying, Unless you save your life this night, tomorrow you will be slain. So Michal let Daud down by the window, and he departed and fled and escaped. And Michal took images and laid them on the bed, and she put the liver of a goat by his head and covered them with clothes. Gross. And Shaul sent messengers to take Daud, and they say that he is sick. And he sends to Daud, saying, Bring him to me on the bed, that I may slay him. And the messengers come, and behold, the images on the bed, and the goat's liver at his head. And Shaul said to Michal, Why hast thou thus deceived me, and suffered my enemy to depart, and he has escaped? And Michal said to Shaul, He said, Let me go, and if not, I will slay you. So Daud fled and escaped, and comes to Samuel to Arimathaim, and tells him all that Shaul had done to him. And Samuel and Daud went and dwelt in Naboth in Ramah. And it was told Shaul, saying, Behold, Daud is in Naboth in Ramah. And Shaul sent messengers to take Daud, and they saw the assembly of the prophets. And Samuel stood appointed over them. And the Ruach of Allah came upon the messengers of Shaul, and they prophesied. And it was told Shaul, and he sent other messengers, and they also prophesied. And Shaul sent again a third set of messengers, and they also prophesied. And Shaul was very angry, and went himself off to Armathaim. And he comes as far as the well of the threshing floor, that is in Sephi. And he asked and said, Where Samuel and Daud? And they said, Behold, in Naboth and Ramah. And he went thence to Naboth and Ramah, and there came the Ruach of Allah upon him also. And he went on prophesying till he came to Naboth and Ramah. And he took off his clothes and prophesied before them, and lay down naked all that day and all that night. Therefore they said, Is Shaul also among the prophets? Interesting. I don't know what to take from that.
Yeah, I don't know. Because David, I remember, I don't think we're up to it yet, but David later on talks about, he spares Saul's life because even though Saul was acting wicked, he was originally anointed by Yahuwah. So I don't know.
You want to go ahead, Jeff?
Yeah, but he also stripped it away from him just as easily as he gave it. All right. So I guess I'll start here in 20 and this. Which one's the Septuagint, bro?
This is the Septuagint.
Okay. Make it too much bigger because I can't read it. I gotta be able to see it right here. It's okay. It's perfect, just like it is. I just need to scroll it. Okay, and starting in chapter 20. And David fled from Nevath in Ramah and comes into the presence of Jonathan, and he said, "What have I done? And what is my fault? And wherein have I sinned before thy father that seeks my life?" And Jonathan said to him, "Far be it from thee, thou shalt not die. Behold, my father will not do anything great or small without discovering it to me. And why should my father hide this matter from me? This thing is not so." David answered Jonathan and said, "Thy father knows surely that I have found grace in thy sight." And he said, "Let now Jonathan know this, lest he refuse his consent. But as the Lord lives and as thy soul lives, as I said, the space is filled up between me and death." I gotta scroll here. And Jonathan said to David, "What is thy soul desire, and what shall I do for thee?" And David said to Jonathan, "Behold, tomorrow is the new moon, and I shall go not on any account, and I shall not on any account sit down to eat, but thou shalt let me go, and I will hide in the plain until evening. And if thy father do in any wise inquire for me, then shalt thou say, David earnestly asked leave of me to run to Bethlehem, his city, for there a yearly sacrifice for all the family. If he shall say thus, well, all is safe for thy servant. But if he shall answer harshly to thee, know that evil is determined by him. And thou shalt deal mercifully with thy servant, for thou hast brought thy servant into a covenant of the Lord with thyself. And if there is iniquity in thy servant, slay me thyself. But why dost thou thus bring me to thy father?" And Jonathan said, "That be far from thee, for if I surely know that evil is determined by my father to come upon thee, although it should not be against thy cities, I will tell thee." And David said to Jonathan, "Who can tell me if thy father should answer roughly?" And Jonathan said to David, "Go and abide in the field." And they went out both into the field. And Jonathan said to David, "The Lord God of Israel knows that I will sound my father as I have an opportunity 3 several times, and behold, if good should be determined concerning David, and I do not send to thee to the field." I'm sorry if my my cadence is off on this. It's not quite written exactly in the usual English cadence, so I'm trying to do my best, but it's coming out sort of staccato here.
You're doing good.
All right.
On the shared screen.
God do so to Jonathan and more also, as I shall. Is this beneficial? Should I switch versions at all? Would it be more beneficial to the listeners, or is this really okay?
I'm following.
If you feel more comfortable to be able to use a restored name version, so you're reading it as Yahuwah Elohim, yeah, that's fine.
All right. Oh well, I was less worried about that, and just like I'm reading it one letter at a time rather than one sentence at a time, or one word at a time rather than a whole sentence at a time. Here.
Okay.
Give me here. Actually, you know what? It's fine. I'll just keep reading this way. Hey, buddy, will you pull up a version for me? And I'll pick it up on the next chapter. Thank you. God do so to Jonathan and more also, as I shall also report the evil to thee and make it known to thee, and I will let thee go, and thou shalt depart in peace, and the Lord shall be with thee as he was with my father. And if indeed I continue to live, then shalt thou deal mercifully with me, and if I indeed die, thou shalt not withdraw thy mercy from my house forever. And if thou dost not, when the Lord cuts off the enemies of David, each from the face of the earth, should it happen that the name of Jonathan be discovered by the house of David, then let the Lord seek out the enemies of David. And Jonathan swore yet again to David, because he loved the soul of him that loved him. And Jonathan said, tomorrow is the new moon, and thou will be inquired for, because thy seat will be observed as vacant. And thou shalt stay 3 days, and watch an opportunity, and shall come to thy place, where thou mayest hide thyself in the day of thy business, and thou shalt wait by the Ergab. And I will shoot 3 arrows, aiming them at a mark. And behold, I will send a lad, saying, go find me the arrow. If I should expressly say to the lad, the arrow is here, and on the side of thee, take it. Then come, for it is well with thee, and there is no reason to fear, as the Lord lives. But if I should say thus to the young man, the arrow is on that side of thee, and beyond, go, for the Lord has sent thee away. So he's giving him a signal there. And as for the word which thou and I have spoken, behold, the Lord is witness between me and thee forever. So David hides himself in the field, and the new month arrives, or the new moon, and the king comes to the table to eat. And he sat upon his seat as in former times, even on his seat by the wall. And he went before Jonathan, and Abner sat on one side of Saul, and the place of David was empty. And so Saul said nothing on that day, for he said, it seems to have fallen out that he is not clean, because he has not purified himself. And it came to pass on the morrow, on the 2nd day of the month, that the place of David was empty. And Saul said to Jonathan his son, why has not the son of Jesse attended both yesterday and today at the table? Jonathan answered Saul and said to him, David asked leave of me to go as far as Bethlehem, his city. And he said, let me go, I pray thee, for we have a family sacrifice in the city, and my brethren have sent for me. And now, if I have found grace in thine eyes, I will even go over to see my brethren. Therefore, he is not present at the table of the king. Saul was exceedingly angry with Jonathan and said to him, thou son of a traitorous damsels, for do I not know that thou art an accomplice with the son of Jesse, to thy shame and to the shame of thy mother's nakedness? For so long as the son of Jesse lives upon the earth, thy kingdom shall not be established. Now then send and take the young man, for he shall surely die. And Jonathan answered Saul, why is he to die? What has he done? And Saul lifted up his spear against Jonathan to slay him. So Jonathan knew that this evil was determined on by his father to slay David. Pretty clear. And Jonathan sprang up from the table in great anger and did not eat bread on the 2nd day of the month, for he grieved bitterly for David, because his father determined on mischief against him. And morning came, and Jonathan went out to the field, as he appointed to do, for the signal to David, and a little boy was with him. He said to the boy, run, find me the arrows which I shoot. And the boy ran, and Jonathan shot an arrow and sent it beyond him. And the boy came to the place where the arrows was at, which Jonathan shot. And Jonathan cried out after the lad and said, the arrow is on that side of thee and beyond thee. And Jonathan cried out after this boy, saying, make all speed and stay not. And Jonathan's boy gathered up the arrows and brought the arrows to his master. And the boy knew nothing, only Jonathan and David knew. And Jonathan gave his weapons to the boy and said to his boy, go, enter into the city. And when the lad went in, then David arose from the Argob, and he fell on his face and did obeisance to him 3 times. And they kissed each other and wept for each other for a great while. And Jonathan said to David, go in peace. And as we have both sworn in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord shall be witness between me and thee, and between my seed and thy seed forever. Even so let it be. And David arose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city. Man, they were best friends, and they had this moment where they know they have to leave each other. You know?
Yep.
Most beautiful story of friendship I ever read.
Yeah,
Sitting here
amazing.
crying my eyes out.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And he even swears, like, he's like, David, I swear to you on the lives of my children's children's children, and even beyond then, that I will do you right, and that I'll find this matter out for you, and that there's no way he wants to kill you. You didn't do nothing wrong. And then he saw how evil his dad truly was when he rose to kill him, and knew that, wow, he is totally capable of doing this, and had allegiance for his best friend over his own father, who was out of his mind. You know?
Hallelujah. And
Pretty
Brother
awesome.
Jeff, I think it's important to bring to the audience and listeners and viewers' attention here. Clearly, David knew the new moon was going to happen the next day without looking into the sky, without going by anyone else's sighting. Okay, he knew ahead of time, 24 hours ahead of time.
I think that they were already, I'm pretty sure at this point in history, bro, they're already using calendars. So
Yeah.
they'd already been able to reckon calendars and know based on a new moon when the next one's coming. You know what I mean? Just like we reckon our months now. So it wouldn't surprise me if they had some technique for reckoning the months, just because they already knew the moon phases were. So
yeah, they had sundials, I think, for the sun patterns in ancient times. So they would have probably had something for the moon to know.
So all right, let's see here.
I'm gonna
And
put an easier version for you up here. I don't know if you're reading from the screen here, but if you are,
I'm going to read from this 2012 Septuagint here. It'll be a little easier.
Yeah, I was thinking of the same idea. I was about to put the Complete Apostles Bible on there. Yep, we're the same wavelength here.
And David comes to Namba to Abimelech the priest, and Abimelech was amazed at meeting him, said to him, "Why are you alone and nobody with you?" And David said to the priest, "The king gave me a command today and said to me, 'Let no one know the matter on which I send you and concerning which I have charged you. And I have charged to my servants to be in the place that is called the faithfulness of Yah, Philani Maimoni. And now if there are under your hand 5 loaves given to my hand, what is ready?" And the priest answered David and jeez, Dave, 5 loaves? And the priest answered David and said, "There are no common loaves under my hand, for I have none but holy loaves. If the young men have been kept at least from women, then they shall eat them." And David answered the priest and said to them, "Yes, we have been kept from women for 3 days. When I came forth for the journey, all thy young men were purified, but this expedition is unclean. Therefore it shall be sanctified to stay because of my weapons." So Abimelech the priest gave him the showbread, for there were no loaves there, but only the presence loaves, which had been removed from the presence of Yahuwah, in order that hot bread should be set on the day on which he took them. Oh, okay, so they weren't literally on the altar. It's the ones they removed because they hit their expiration.
Yep.
And there was that dude, God, that actually adds so much difference to the story when he's speaking with the Pharisees. And there was there on that day one of Saul's servants detained before Yahuwah, and his name was Doeg the Syrian, tending the mules of Saul. And David sought to Abimelech, and David said to Abimelech, "See if there is here under your hand spear or sword, for I have not brought in my hand my sword or my weapons." For the word of the king was urgent. The priest said, "Behold, the sword of Goliath, the Philistine, whom you struck in the valley of Elah," he knows exactly who he is, "and it is wrapped in a cloth. If you will take it for yourself, for there is no other except it here." And David said, "Behold, there is none like it. Give it to me." And he gave it to him. And David arose and fled in that day from the presence of Saul. And David came to Anchus, king of Gath. I'd like to point out that he took it as a weapon, and it was at least small enough or not so big that he couldn't take it as a viable weapon. So that's, something worth noting. He was able to use it as a weapon, which means it was small enough for him to swing it, or, he was strong enough to swing it. So, and the servants of Anchus said to him, "Is not David the king of the land? Did not the dancing women begin the son to him? saying, Saul has struck his 1,000 and David his 10,000s? And David laid up the words in his heart and was greatly afraid of Anchus, king of Gath. And he changed his appearance before him, feigned himself a false character in that day, and drummed upon the doors of the city, and used extravagant gestures with his hands, and fell against the doors of the gate, and his spittle ran down his beard.
Oh, boy.
Okay. And Anchus said to his servant, behold, you see the man is mad. Why have you brought him to me? Am I in lack of madmen that you have brought him in to me to play the madman? He shall not come into my house. Oh my goodness. And David departed thence and escaped, and he comes to the cave of Adullam. And his brethren hear in the house of his father, and they go down to him there. And there gathered to him everyone that was in distress, and everyone that was in debt, and everyone that was troubled in mind. And he was a leader over them, and there were with him about 400 men. Wow! So he's a king, not on his own throne, and people are gathered to him. These people in distress that need some sort of rest and reprieve, gathered to this king figure who's not on his throne. And David departed thence to Mestaphath of Moab, and said to the king of Moab, let I pray you, my father and my mother be with you until I know that Yah will do to me. And he persuaded the king of Moab, and they dwell with him continually while David was in the hold. And God the prophet, said to David, dwell not in the hold, go and you shall enter the land of Judah. So David went and came and lived in the city of Sarek. And Saul heard that David was discovered, and his men with him. Now Saul lived in the hill below the field that was in Ramah, and his spear was in his hand, and all his servants stood near him. Saul stood to his servants and said to his servants that stood by him, hear now, you sons of Benjamin, will the son of Jesse indeed give all of you fields and vineyards? And will he make you all captains of hundreds and captains of thousands, that you are conspiring against me? And there is no one that informs me, whereas my son has made a covenant with the son of Jesse, and there is none of you that is sorry for me, or informs me that my son has stirred up my servants against me for an enemy, as it is this day. And Doeg the Syrian, who was over the mules of Saul, answered and said, I saw the son of Jesse as he came to Namba to Abimelech, son of Achitob the priest, and the priest inquired of Yah for him, and gave him provision, and gave him the sword of Goliath the Philistine. And the king sent to call Abimelech, son of Achitob, and all his father's sons, the priests that were in Namba, and they all came to the king. And Saul said, hear now, you son of Achitob. And he said, behold, I am here, speak, my lord. And Saul said to him, why have you and the son of Jesse conspired against me, that you should give him bread and a sword, and should inquire of Yah for him, to raise him up against me as an enemy, as he is this day? And he answered the king and said, and who is there among all your servants faithful as David? And he is a son-in-law of the king, and is executor of all your commands. And is honorable in your house. Have I begun today to inquire of Yah for him? By no means. Let not the king bring a charge against his servant, and against against the whole of my father's house. For your servant knew not in all of these matters anything great or small. And King Saul said, you shall surely die, Abimelech, you and all your father's house. And the king said to the footmen that attended on him, draw near and kill the priests of the Lord, because their hand is with David, and because they knew that he fled, and they did not inform me. But the servants of the king would not lift their hands to fall upon the priests of the Lord. Nice. And the king said to Doeg, turn you and fall upon the priests. And Doeg the Syrian turned and killed the priests of the Lord in that day, 305 men, all wearing an ephod. Man, holy moly. And he struck Namba, the city of the priest, with the edge of the sword, both man and woman, infant, suckling the calf, ox, and sheep. And the son of Abimelech, son of Achitob, escapes, and his name was Abiathar, and he fled after David. And Abiathar told David that Saul had slain all the priests of the Lord. And David said to Abiathar, I knew it in that day that Doeg the Syrian would surely tell Saul, I'm guilty of the death of the house of your father. Dwell with me, fear not, for wherever I shall seek a place for safety for my life, I will also seek a place for your life, for you are safely guarded while with me. 23. And it was told David, saying, Behold, the Philistines war in Keilah, and they rob, they trample on the threshing floors. And David inquired of the Lord, saying, Shall I go and strike these Philistines? And the Lord said, Go, and you shall strike these Philistines, and shall save Keilah. The men of David said to him, Behold, we are afraid here in Judea. Then how shall it be if we go to Keilah? Shall we go after the spoils of the Philistines? And David inquired yet again of the Lord. And the Lord answered him and said to him, Arise and go down to Keilah, for I will deliver the Philistines into your hands. So David and his men with him went to Keilah and fought with the Philistines, and they fled from before him, and he carried off their cattle and struck them with a great slaughter. And David rescued the inhabitants of Keilah. And it came to pass when Abiathar, the son of Abimelech, fled to David, that he went down with David to Keilah, having an ephod in his hand. And it was told Saul that David was come to Keilah. And Saul said, God has sold him into my hands, for he is shut up, having entered into a city that has gates and bars. And Saul charged all the people to go down to war with Keilah and besiege David and his men. And David knew that Saul spoke openly of mischief against him. And David said to Abiathar the priest, Bring the ephod of the Lord. And David said, Lord God of Israel, your servant has indeed heard that Saul seeks to come against Keilah to destroy the city on my account. Will the place be shut up? And now will Saul come down as your servant has heard? Lord God of Israel, tell your servant. The Lord said, it will be shut up. David arose and the men with him, in number about 400, and they went forth from Keilah and went wherever they could go. And it was told Saul that David had escaped from Keilah, and he forebode to come. And he lived in Mazarim in the wilderness, in the narrow passes, and lived in the wilderness in Mount Ziph, in the dry country. And Saul sought him continually, but the Lord delivered him not into his hands. David perceived that Saul went forth to seek David, and David was in the dry mountain in the new Ziph. And Jonathan, son of Saul, rose and went to David to Cana, and strengthened his hand in the Lord. And he said to him, Fear not, for the hand of Saul my father shall not find you, and you shall be king over Israel. I shall be second to you, and Saul my father knows it. So they both made a covenant before the Lord, and David lived in Cain, and Jonathan went to his home. And the Ziphites came up out of the dry country to Saul to the hill, saying, Behold, is not David hidden with us in Mazarah, in the narrows of Cana, in the hill of Eshua, which is on the right of Jessamon? And now, according to all the king's desire to come down, let him come down to us. They have shut him up into the hands of the king. And Saul said to them, Blessed be you of the Lord, for you have been grieved on my account. Go, I pray you, and make preparations yet. Notice his place where his foot shall be quickly, in that place which you spoke of, lest by any means he should deal craftily. Take notice then, and learn, and I will go with you. And it shall come to pass that if he is in the land, I will search him out among all the thousands of Judah. And the Ziphites arose and went before Saul, and David and his men were in the wilderness of Maon, westward to the right of Jessamon. And Saul and his men went to seek him, and they brought word to David. And he went down to the rock that was in the wilderness of Maon, and Saul heard and followed after David in the wilderness of Maon. And Saul and his men go on one side of the mountain, and David and his men on the other side of the mountain. And David was hiding himself to escape from Saul, and Saul and his men encamped against David and his men in order to take them. And there came a messenger to Saul, saying, Haste you and come here, for the Philistines have invaded the land. So Saul returned from following after David and went to meet the Philistines. Therefore, that place was called the Divided Rock. And so this guy Saul is so oblivious, man. He by his own decisions loses his own election as king, and then gets mad at all the good things. He's essentially a hater on David. You know what I mean? and he thinks somehow it's okay for him to remain king if he can just slay David, and it's like he has completely been working since that point in utter darkness out of his own pride, and all of his decisions he believes are coming from the Lord. He says, oh, surely the Lord's delivered them into my hand, and making these sorts of statements out of ignorance and like pride. But I think Josh was right. This guy's got some problems, man. Chapter 24. And are we going to 25 or reading 25?
Let me see here. That's a good question. Let me see here. Yeah, reading 25.
Okay, so 24. And David rose up from thence and lived in the narrow passes of Engedi. And it came to pass when Saul returned from pursuing after the Philistines that it was reported to him, saying, David is in the wilderness of the Engedi. And he took with him 3,000 men chosen out of all Israel and went to seek David and his men in front of Sedaim. And he came to the flocks of sheep that were by the way, and there was a cave there. And Saul went in to make preparation, and David and his men were sitting in the inner part of the cave. And the men of David said to him, behold, this is the day of which the Lord spoke to you, that he would deliver your enemy into your hands, and you shall do it to him as it is good in your sight. So David arose and cut off the skirt of Saul's garment secretly. Cut off the skirt of Saul's garment secretly. And it came to pass after this that David's heart struck him, because he had cut off the skirt of his garment.
Like the seat?
Yeah, I'm wondering if it's the same way he pulled the fringe off the hem of the robe off the priest, and it signified him taking away his authority that day, right? That I wonder if this is somehow similar. That it's finally come back around to him. Well, anyway, so and David said to his men, the Lord forbid it me that I should do this thing to my Lord, the anointed of the Lord, to lift my hand against him, for he is the anointed of the Lord. So David persuaded his men by his words, and did not suffer them to arise and kill Saul. And Saul arose and went his way. And David rose up and went after him out of the cave, and David cried after Saul, saying, my Lord, O king. And Saul looked behind him, and David bowed with his face to the ground, and did obeisance to him. And David said to Saul, why do you listen to the words of the people, saying, behold, David seeks your life? Behold, your eyes have seen this day how that the Lord has delivered you this day into my hands in the cave, and I would not kill you, but spared you, and said, I will not lift up my hand against my Lord, for he is the Lord's anointed. And behold, the skirt of your mantle is in my hand. Oh, he was showing him he could get close enough to do it. And behold, the skirt of your mantle is in my hand. I cut off the skirt and did not kill you. Now then, you see here today, there is no evil in my hand, nor impiety, nor rebellion, and I have not sinned against you. Yet you lay snares for my soul to take it. The Lord judge between me and you, and the Lord requite you on yourself. But my hand shall not be upon you. As the old proverb says, transgression will proceed from the wicked ones, but my hand shall not be upon you. And now after whom do you come forth, O King of Israel? After whom do you pursue? After a dead dog and after a flea? The Lord be judge and umpire between me and you. The Lord look upon and judge my cause and rescue me out of your hand. And it came to pass, when David had finished speaking these words to Saul, that Saul said, is this your voice, son David? And Saul lifted up his voice and wept. And Saul said to David, you are more righteous than I, for you have recompensed me good, but I have recompensed you evil. And you have told me today what good you have done me, how the Lord shut me up into your hands, and you did not kill me. And if anyone should find his enemy in distress, and should send him forth in a good way, then the Lord will reward him for good, as you have done this day. And now behold, I know that you shall surely reign, and the kingdom of Israel shall be established in your hands. Now then swear to me by the Lord that you will not destroy my seed after me, that you will not blot out my name from the house of my father. So David swore to Saul, and Saul departed to his place, and David and his men went up to the stronghold of Messerah. 25. And Samuel died, And all Israel assembled and bewailed him. And they buried him in his house in Amarathim. And David arose and went down to the wilderness of Maon. And there was a man in Maon, and his flocks were in Carmel. And he was a very great man. And he had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 she-goats. And he happened to be shearing his flock in Carmel. And the man's name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail. Abigail? Yeah, Abigail. And his wife was of good understanding and very beautiful in person. But the man was harsh and evil in his doings, and the man was churlish. And David heard in the wilderness that Nabal the Carmelite was shearing his sheep. And David sent 10 young men, and he said to the young men, Go up to Carmel, go to Nabal, and ask him in my name how he is. And thus shall you say, May you and your house seasonably prosper, and all your be in prosperity. And now behold, I have heard that your shepherds who were with is in the wilderness are shearing your sheep, and we hindered them not, neither did we demand anything from them all the time that they were in Carmel. Ask your servants, and they will tell you. Let then your servants find grace in your eyes, for we are come on a good day. Give, we pray you, whatever your hand may find to your son David. So the servants come and speak these words to Nabal according to all the words in the name of David. And Nabal sprang up and answered the servants and said, Who is David? And who is the son of Jesse? Nowadays there is an abundance of servants who depart every one from his master. And shall I take my bread and my wine and my beasts and that I have slain for my shearers, and shall give them to men of whom I knew not whence they are? So the servants of David turned back and returned and came and reported to David according to these words. David said to his men, Gird on every man his sword. And whoa, 0 to 100, David. And David said to his men, Gird on every man his sword. And they went up after David, about 400 men, and 200 abode with the stuff. And one of the servants reported to Abigail, the wife of Nabal, saying, Behold, David sent messengers out of the wilderness to salute our Lord, but he turned away from them. And the men were very good to us. They did not hinder us, neither did they demand from us anything at all the days that we were with them. And when we were in the field, they were as a wall round about us, both by day and night, all the days that we were with them, feeding the flock. And now do you consider and see what you will do? For mischief is determined against our Lord and against his house. And he is a vile character, and one can't speak to him. And Abigail hasted and took 200 loaves and 2 vessels of wine. She hasted with 200 loaves? You know what it takes to make one loaf?
I can't even make one.
Boy, with 200, these people are ready. Sorry. 2 vessels of wine, 5 sheep ready dressed, and 5 ephahs of fine flour, and 1 omer of dried grapes, and 200 cakes of figs, and put them upon donkeys. And she said to her servants, Go on before me, and behold, I come after you. But she told not her husband. And it came to pass, when she had mounted her ass and was going down by the covert of the mountain, behold, David and his men came down to meet her, and she met them. And David said, Perhaps I have kept all his possessions in the wilderness, that he should wrong me. But he did not order the taking anything of all his goods. Yet he has rewarded me evil for good. So Yah do to David and more also, if I leave 1 male of all that belong to Nabal until the morning. And Abigail saw David, and she hasted and alighted from her ass, and she fell before David on her face, and did obeisance to him, bowing to the ground, even to his feet, and said, On me, my Lord, be my wrong. Let, I pray you, your servant speak in your ears, and hear you the words of your servant. Let not my Lord, I pray you, take to heart this pestilent man. For according to his name, so is he. Nabal is his name, and folly is with him. But I, your handmaid, saw not the servants of my Lord, who you did send. And now, my Lord, as the Lord lives and your soul lives, as the Lord has kept you from coming against the innocent blood and from executing vengeance for yourself, now therefore let your enemies and those that seek evil against my Lord become as Nabal. And now accept this token of goodwill which your servant has brought to my Lord, and you shall give it to the servants that wait on my Lord. Remove, I pray you, the trespass of your servant, for the Lord will surely make for my Lord a sure house. For the Lord fights the battles of my for it fights the battles of my Lord, and there shall no evil ever be found in you. And if a man shall rise up persecuting you and seeking your life, yet shall the life of my Lord be bound up in the bundle of life with the Lord Yahuwah, and you shall whirl the life of your enemies as in the midst of a sling. And it shall be, when the Lord shall have wrought for my Lord all the good things he has spoken concerning you, and shall appoint you to rule over Israel, then this shall not be an abomination and offense to my Lord, to have shed innocent blood without cause, and for my Lord to have avenged himself. And so may the Lord do good to my Lord, and you shall remember your handmaid to do her good. And David said to Abigail, blessed be the Lord God of Israel, who sent you this very day to meet me. And blessed be your conduct, blessed be you, who have hindered me this very day from coming to shed blood and from avenging myself. But surely, as the Lord God of Israel lives, whom hindered me this day from doing you harm, if you had not hasted and come to meet me, then I said, there shall surely not be left in Nabal till the morning one male. David took of her hand all that she brought to him, and said to her, go in peace to your house. See, I have listened to your voice and accept your petition. And Abigail came to Nabal, and behold, he had a banquet in this house as the banquet of a king, and the heart of Nabal was merry within him, and he was very drunken. And she told him nothing great or small till the morning light. And it came to pass in the morning, when Nabal recovered from his wine, his wife told him these words, and his heart died within him, and he became as a stone. And it came to pass after about 10 days that the Lord struck Nabal, and he died. And David heard it and said, blessed be the Lord, who has judged the cause of my reproach and at the hand of Nabal, and has delivered his servant from the power of evil. And the Lord has returned the mischief of Nabal upon his own head. And David sent and spoke concerning Abigail, to take her to himself for wife. So the servants of David came to Abigail to Carmel, and spoke to her, saying, David has sent us to you, to take you to himself for a wife. And she arose and did reverence with her with her face to the earth, and said, behold, your servant is for a handmaid to wash the feet of your servants. And Abigail arose and mounted her ass, and 5 damsels followed her. And she went after the servants of David and became his wife. David took Achinaim out of Jezreel, and they were both his wives. And Saul gave Melchol his daughter, David's wife, to Phalti, the son of Amos, who was of Roma. That's it.
Yes, very
Great
good.
job, bro. I know it was hard.
No, that was
So that-
excellent.
Great job. So, yeah. So just for informative in the future, in the English where you see, especially in the Septuagint, I know it's confusing because the Masoretic makes you think, the Lord can mean my master. It's actually, when it's referring to the Father and it says the Lord God, I mean, most of us know this, but just for the viewers and listeners, the actual correct terminology would be Yahuwah Elohim. So just for the listeners out there, just wanted to explain that. So in the Masoretic might say Adonai Yahuwah, but there's no Adonai in the Greek. There's no equivalent in that in the from the Septuagint. Whenever it says the Lord God, it's Yahuwah Elohim or Yahuwah Elua, depending if it's singular for the Elohim. Just to explain that, just for future reference. So anyway, Sister Josie, are you able to read Psalm 74 for us?
Oh, yes, Psalm 74, I sure can.
Yeah, okay. I'll mute
Okay.
myself here.
I'm going to read from the TS 2009. Is that okay?
Yeah, cool, perfect.
Okay. O Elohim, why do you forever reject us? Why does your displeasure smoke against the sheep of your pasture? Remember your congregation. You did purchase of old the tribe of your inheritance. You did redeem this Mount Zion where you have dwelt. Lift up your steps to the endless ruins. The enemy has done all evil. in the set apart place. Your adversaries have roared in the midst of your appointments. They have set up their own signs as signs. It seems as if one had lifted up axes among the thick trees, and now all its carved work they have broken down with axe and hammer. They have set fire to your set apart place. They have profaned the dwelling place of your name to the ground. They said in their hearts, let us suppress them altogether. They burned all the appointment places of El in the land. We do not see our signs. There is no longer a prophet, nor any among us who knows how long. O Elohim, how long would the adversary reproach? What would the enemy despise your name forever? Why do you hold back your hand, even your right hand, from the midst of your bosom? End it. For Elohim is my sovereign from old, working deliverance in the midst of the earth. You divided the sea by your might. You broke the heads of the sea serpents in the waters. You broke the heads of Leviathan in pieces. You made him food for the people living in the wilderness. You did cleave open the fountain and the flood. You did dry up mighty rivers. The day is yours. The night is yours too. You have established the light and the sun. You have set all the borders of the earth. You have made summer and winter. Remember this. The enemy has reproached Yah, and a foolish people has despised your name. Do not give the being of your turtle dove to the wild beasts. Do not forget the life of your afflicted ones forever. Look to the covenant, for the dark places of the earth are filled with haunts of violence. Let not the crushed one return ashamed. Let the poor and needy praise your name. Arise, O Elohim, plead your own case, your own cause. Remember how the foolish man reproaches you daily. Do not forget the voices of your enemies, the uproar of those rising up against you increases continually. Wow. Wow, that sounds like today, all right.
See here. I'm just seeing. I remembered, sis. I had some notes written down from this chapter, some pretty quick ones.
Okay.
I just wanted to go through. I already pre-read this during the week, so I would have stuff written down. Let's see here. 74 verse 1, sheep of his own pasture. So you got, I'll let Gibson's go because I got a whole list. So I'll let the Gibsons go first. Go ahead, guys.
Oh, dude, don't hold. Sorry, Joshua wanted me to explain this. So don't hold back your right hand from your bosom. That line, right? It's also a cross reference to Moses showing Pharaoh when he takes his hand, puts it in his garment, pulls it out, and it's dead. His hand is like withered and like the skin is white. Remember?
Leprous.
Like he's like it's like leprous. The skin is dying, and then all he does is put it back in his garment and pull it back out, and it's back to life again. It's almost the picture. Well, it is the picture of Yahuwah, using his own right hand, his Messiah, himself, his word, his right hand, and him killing that flesh and raising it 3 days later. It's hold back not your hand from me. The line about keeping it to your bosom. It's literally a quick picture of his death and resurrection as pictured by Moses with his hand to the Pharaoh, to the people, when he had to prove that he was indeed who he said he was. It was one of the signs that he had to use. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It actually reminds me in John chapter 1, where it says the only begotten who is in the bosom of the Father. So actually, John would add to that sentiment, would agree with that sentiment. The Apostle John. See here if I can find it. I think it's like 118. Yeah, here we go. No man has seen the Father at any time, and we just read about this in Genesis earlier. Yeah, they didn't see the Father, but they saw the Son. The only begotten Son, and it actually, that's what it's saying here in John. They didn't see the Father, but they saw the only begotten Son, which was in the bosom of the Father. He has declared him, and just for interest here, you're interested in the Aramaic here. It's let me see. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. We beheld his esteem. Esteem is only the begotten of the Father, full of favor and truth. Oh, whoops. Here we go. No man has seen Alua at any time, but the only begotten Alua, who is in the bosom of the Father, he has declared him. So showing that begotten of Yahuwah doesn't mean that someone's separate from Yahuwah. So it's actually saying the only begotten Alua, who is in the bosom of Yahuwah, he has declared him. And so I just thought that was interesting. Goes with what Brother Jeff was talking about. But man, I got a whole list for chapter 74 here. Let's see. We start at the first verse. I see a oneness here in the first verse here. The sheep of his pasture. Okay. So it talks about you can find that in Ezekiel 34:23, John chapter 10, verse 11, John chapter 10, verse 16, Ezekiel 34:11. And in John, Yahusha is referencing that he is, that Yahusha is the shepherd.
Right.
If you go to Ezekiel, the Father's saying he's the shepherd. So you see a little oneness there. Psalm 74, verse 2. I have some notes here. Deuteronomy 5:6, Exodus 20, verse 2, 1 Corinthians 6, verse 20, Exodus 15, verse 13, 1 Peter 2:9. These are all talking about us being his peculiar possession. That's why I put all these cross references together for verse 2. Exodus 19:5 is the first time Yahuwah says that about Israel. Okay, so let's see here. So we got Psalm 74, verse 3. And I have written here, Yahuwah's home is in Jerusalem. His name was he always had one specific place that his name would be called by. So we got to be careful when we read stuff when it says that I've choose my name to be called. That's always talking about either the tabernacle in the wilderness or the temple in Jerusalem. And the temple in Jerusalem, there's actually more proofs of this, and we can go to 2 Chronicles. There's a couple of cross references here. 6 verse 6. Okay, so we got, but I have chosen Jerusalem that my name might be there, and I've chosen David to be over my people Israel. Then we go prior to that in verse 5. Since the day that I brought forth my people out of the land of Egypt, I chose no city among all the tribes of Israel to build a house in, that my name might be there. Neither have I chose any man to be a ruler over my people Israel. So in context, it's talking about Yahuwah chose David to be over his people, and now Yahuwah, at that moment in time in 2 Chronicles chapter 6, chose Jerusalem specifically, where his name would be, where his name would dwell. So that we have to use that as the same context when we look at commandments like Deuteronomy 12:5, where it says only where Yahuwah chooses his name to dwell. But unto the place which Yahuwah your Elohim shall choose out of all your tribes to put his name there, where he chooses to put his name there. So we got to keep that in context too. Exodus 15:13. Let's see here. Exodus 15:13. Let me just make sure I'm on the right thing here. Yeah. Oh no, I'm on the wrong thing. That's why. Zechariah 2:12. Actually, I wanted to go to here. So you got Zechariah 2:12. Okay. Yahuwah shall inherit Judah his portion in the set apart land, and shall choose, this is prophecy here, shall choose Jerusalem again meaning choosing Jerusalem as his home again. Okay, so let's see here. And then we got one more from Second Chronicles. And let's see here. Second Chronicles chapter 7, verses 11 to 12. All right. Thus Solomon finished the house of Yahuwah and the king's house and all that came into Solomon's heart to make in the house of Yahuwah and in his own house. He prosperously effected. And Yahuwah appeared to Solomon by night and said unto him, I have heard your prayer and have chose this place to myself for a house of sacrifice. So Yahuwah always chose one specific place as a house of sacrifice. Okay. Let's see here. I did have something to mention in, let's see, I think that might have been verse 7 of Psalm 74. Something struck out there for me. Let me see here. They have cast fire into, oh no, that's the same thing. Okay. All right. No more prophets of Yahuwah to tell the significant, tell the signs of the times. This has nothing to do with astrology. Psalm 74:9. We see not our signs. There's no more any prophet. Neither is there any among us, any that knows how long. Obviously, this is referring to prophecy, biblical prophecy. So they're not saying, oh, we don't have, astrological signs or anything. It's in context is referring to that we don't know the signs of the times. We don't know, which is kind of funny because actually Yahusha rebukes some of the Israelites actually for not understanding the signs of the times. They're always seeking for a sign. And in Matthew 16:31. See here. Where is it? Did I have it written down wrong? Let's see here. What the heck? Is it in Mark? Maybe that's why can't find it or something. You okay there, Mom?
Yeah, I'm fine, honey.
Okay. Let me see here. Why do I wrote this down? Do you not know the signs of the times? Sorry about that, everyone. 16:3. Okay, my bad about that. I don't know why I put 31 there. Okay, so sign Matthew 16:3. And in the morning, stormy weather today, for the heaven is red and overcast. You know how to discern the face of heaven, but you are unable to discern the signs of the times. So basically, Yahusha is referencing here, you know how to look at the sky, you know what the weather's going to be, but yet you can't figure out the signs of the times, And so I just thought that was interesting to bring up. 74 verse 12, my king from eternity who brings salvation to the earth. It reminded me of Micah chapter 5 verse 2, and just wanted to bring that one up. But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, we've been going through this whole study today about those two locations throughout this whole study today. Bethlehem Ephrathah, you who are little among the clans of Judah, out of you shall come to me one who is to be ruler in Israel, and his goings forth are from the beginning, even from eternity. So moving on here, 13 to 15, I thought was interesting. He split the sea, crushed the heads of Leviathan, which I thought was pretty interesting. I have written down here for verses 13 to 15. There seems to be a connection with Satan here. If you go to Isaiah 27 verse 1. In that day, Yahuwah with his severe sword, great and strong, punishes Leviathan, the fleeing serpent. Leviathan, that twisted that twisted serpent, and he shall slay the monster that's in the sea. If you go to the Septuagint, it says the dragon.
Crushing his head.
Yeah, says,
Yeah.
yeah, which actually, yeah, would refer back to Genesis 3:15, actually, which is interesting. So, let's see, Psalms 74:16 made the moon and the sun. You can go back to Genesis 1:14-18 with that. Verse 20 of this chapter in Psalm 74, don't forget your covenant promise. I have written down here Exodus 2:24, and that's pretty much it. So sorry about that, Sister Josie. I just had a lot of notes for that. I'll let you continue.
Did you want me to read 75?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, no
Okay.
problem.
Okay, let me get over there. One sec.
No.
Okay. Oops, one sec. 75. We shall give thanks to you, O Elohim. We shall give thanks, and your name is near. Your wonders shall be declared. When I seize the appointed time, it is I who judge in uprightness. The earth and all its inhabitants are melted. It is I who set its columns firm, Selah. I said to the boasters, do not boast, and to the wrong, do not lift up the horn. Do not lift up your horn on high. You speak with a stiff neck. For exaltations are neither from the east, nor from the west, nor from the wilderness. But Elohim is a judge. He puts down one and exalts another. For a cup is in the hand of Yahuwah, and the wine shall foam. It is filled with a mixture, and he pours it out. All the wrong of the earth drink, draining it to the dregs. But I declare forever, I sing praises to the Elohim of Jacob, and all the horns of the wrong I cut off. The horns of the righteous are lifted up. Did you want to expound?
Well, I think the only one I really had a note of that really stood out was you just read about the undiluted wine. And we can go to Revelations for that. He gives the diluted wine for the cup of his wrath in Revelations 14:10. I'm pretty sure there's other places in Revelations. I just don't have it written down where else you can find the cup that Yahuwah gives the wicked. He will also drink, and this is referring to anyone that takes the mark of the beast, that has the number of his name, or the number of his name, or his mark, or his let me go back to here. Let me see here. Verse 9. And another angel followed them, saying in a loud voice, if anyone worships the beast and his image and receives a mark on his forehead or on his hand, he will also drink of the wine of Yahuwah's wrath, the wine that has been poured undiluted. In the Septuagint, in that verse you read actually says undiluted, so it seems to connect there. Yeah. Into the cup of his anger. The person who drinks it will be tormented in fire and sulfur before Yahuwah's set apart angels and before the Lamb. So that's about it. That's the only thing I have as a reference for, so we could continue.
76. One second.
Yes.
Okay. In Yehuda, Elohim is known. His name is great in Israel, and his booth is in Shalim, and his dwelling place in Zion. There he broke the arrows of the bow, the shield and the sword, and the battle axe, Selah. You are resplendent, more excellent than mountains of prey. The stout-hearted have been stripped. They slept their sleep, and none of the mighty men have found their hands. At your rebuke, O Elohim of Jacob, both the rider and the horse lay stunned. You are to be feared. And who would stand in your presence when you are displeased? From heaven you shall cause judgment to be heard. The earth shall fear and shall be still. When Elohim arises to right ruling, to save all the meek of the earth. Selah. For the wrath of mankind praises you, but the remainder of wrath you gird yourself. Make vows to Yahuwah your Elohim and pay them. Let all who are around him bring presents to the one to be feared. He cuts off the spirit of leaders. He is awesome to the sovereigns of the earth.
Feel free to go ahead, sis. I don't have anything for that chapter.
Okay. Can I just ask a question on verse 11?
Yeah, sure.
When it says, let all who are around him bring presents to the one to be feared. Presents meaning exactly what?
Like I would say, I think it's referring to like the actual gifts that were probably required in the law. I think presence is kind of like a really loose paraphrasing on that. I would
Well,
think it's. Yep, go ahead, Gibson's.
free will offerings, bro.
Yeah,
Their
Free
own
will
gift,
offerings. Did
accord.
you say
Yeah,
that? Oh, okay.
offerings of their own free will. Yes, gifts of
Oh,
praise.
okay.
yeah.
Gifts from their own free will. Okay, thank you so much. Okay.
There's something called a free will.
Right.
Give it some time, but yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, free will offerings or gifts. Sometimes the free will offerings are called gifts in certain translations. Like it'll
Right.
talk about even Messiah in the New Testament. He talks about bring your before you bring your gift to the altar, and he was talking about a free will offering actually. So
Right.
yeah,
Okay. Psalm 77. My voice is to Elohim, and I cry. My voice is to Elohim, and he listened to me. In the day of my distress, I sought Yahuwah. My hand was stretched out in the night, and it did not cease. My being refused to be comforted. I remembered Elohim and groaned. I complained, and my spirit grew faint. Selah. You ceased the watches of my eyes. I was too troubled to speak. I have thought about the days of old, the years long past. I remember my song in the night. I meditate within my heart, and my spirit searches diligently. When Yahuwah, would Yahuwah reject forever and never again be pleased? Has his loving commitment ceased forever? Has the promise failed for all generations? Has El forgotten to show favor? Has he shut up his compassions in displeasure? Selah. And I said, this is my grief, that the right hand of the Most High has changed. I remember the deeds of Yah, for I remember your wonders of old, and I shall meditate on all your work and talk of your deeds. Your way, O Elohim, is in the sit apartness. Who is a great El like Elohim? You are the El who does wonders. You have made known your strength among the peoples. By your arm you have redeemed your people, the sons of Jacob and Yosef, Selah. The waters saw you, O Elohim. The waters saw you. They were afraid. The depths also trembled. The clouds poured out water. The heavens rumbled. Also, your arrows flashed back and forth. The voice of your thunder rolled. Lightnings lit up the whirl. The earth trembled and shook. Your way was in the sea, and your path in the great waters, and your footsteps were not known. You did lead your people like a flock by the hand of Moshe and Aharon. Wow, I mean, just try to picture all this. Wow.
Um, trying to think. The only difference I really saw to bring about before we go to 78 would be for whatever reason the Masoretes decided to put Elohim in verse 1 instead of Yahuwah, which I find interesting.
Huh.
Oh, like the on my screen here, you can see from the Septuagint all caps Lord, and
Hmm.
the well, yeah, you're an NIV, right?
Right.
Oh, that's why.
Okay.
Yeah, the NIV has the Masoretic text. The NIV is using the Masoretic, which has Elohim. So yeah, what's good about the Septuagint here is showing that the Tetragrammaton should be here,
Mm-hmm.
and so yeah, that's pretty interesting. That's the only real difference I saw here, though. It was almost word for word the
Yeah.
same for the rest
The
of the
same.
chapter. All right.
Okay. Psalm 78. My people, give ear to my Torah. Incline your ears to the words of my mouth. I open my mouth in a parable. I utter riddles of old, which we have heard and known, for our fathers have related them to us. We do not hide them from their children, relating to the generation to come the praises of Yahuwah and his strength and his wonders which he has done. For he raised a witness in Jacob and set a Torah in Israel, which he commanded our fathers to teach them to their children, that it might be known to a generation to come, to children who would be born, to rise up and relate them to their children, and place their trust in Elohim, and not forget the works of El, but watch over his commands, and not be like their fathers, a stubborn and rebellious generation, a generation which did not prepare its heart, whose spirit was not steadfast to El. The children of Ephraim, armed bowmen, turned back in the day of battle. They did not guard the covenant of Elohim, and they refused to walk in his Torah, and they forgot his deeds and his wonders which he had shown them. He did wonders in the sight of their fathers in the land of Mitzrayim, in the field of Tosan. He split the sea and caused them to pass through, and he made the waters stand up like a heap, and led them with the cloud by day and all the night with a light of fire. He split the rocks in the wilderness and made them drink as from the great depths, and brought forth streams from the rock, and caused waters to come down as rivers. Yet they sinned still more against him, to rebel against the Most High in the desert. And they tried El in their heart by asking food according to their desire. And they spoke against Elohim. They said, is El able to set a table in the wilderness? Look, he struck the rock so that the waters gushed out and the streams overflowed. Is he able to give bread also? Would he provide meat for his people? Therefore Yahuwah heard, and he was wroth. So a fire was kindled against Jacob, and displeasure also came up against Israel, because they did not believe in Elohim, neither did they trust in his deliverance. Yet he had commanded the clouds above and opened the doors of the heavens, and he rained down manna on them to eat, and he gave them the grain of the heavens. Men ate bread of the mighty. He sent them provisions to satisfaction. He made an east wind blow in the heavens, and by his power he brought in the south wind. And he rained meat on them like the dust, and winged birds like the sand of the seas, and let them fall in the midst of his camp, all around his dwelling place. So they ate and were completely satisfied, for he brought them what they desired. They had not turned away from their desire. Their food was still in their mouth when the wrath of Elohim came against them, and he killed among their fat ones, and he struck down the choice ones of Israel. In spite of all this, they still sinned and did not believe in his wonders. So he ended their days in a breath and their years in trouble. When he killed them, then they sought him, and they returned and did earnestly seek El. And they remembered that Elohim was their rock, and the Most High El, their Redeemer. But they flattered him with their mouth, and they lied to him with their tongue. For their heart was not steadfast with him, and they were not true to his covenant. But he, the compassionate one, pardoned crookedness and did not destroy them. And many a time he turned his displeasure away and did not stir up all his wrath. For he remembered that they were but flesh, a passing breath that does not return. How often they rebelled against him in the wilderness and grieved him in the desert. And again they tried El and provoked the set apart one of Israel. They did not remember his hand the day when he redeemed them from the adversary, how he worked his signs in Mitzrayim and his wonders in the field of Tozan. He turned their rivers into blood, and they could not drink their streams. He sent among them swarms of flies which devoured them, and frogs which destroyed them, and gave their crops to the caterpillar, and their labor to the locust. He destroyed their vines with hail, and their sycamore trees with frost, and gave their beast over to the hail, and their livestock to bolts of fire. He sent on them the burning of his displeasure, wrath and rage and distress, a deputation of messengers of evil. He made a path for his displeasure. He did not spare their being from death, but gave their life over to the plague. And he struck all the firstborn in Mitzrayim, the first fruits of strength in the tents of Ham, then made his own people go forth like sheep, and led them in the wilderness like a flock. And he led them on safely, and they did not fear, but the seed covered their enemies. And he brought them to the border of his set apart place, this mountain which his right hand had gained, and drove out nations before them, and allotted them a measured inheritance, and made the tribes of Israel dwell in their tents. Yet they tried and rebelled against the Most High Elohim, and did not guard his witnesses, but they turned back and acted treacherously like their fathers. They twisted like a treacherous bow, for they enraged him with their high places, and moved him to jealousy with their carved images. When Elohim heard this, he was wroth and greatly despised Israel. And he left the dwelling place of Shiloh, the tent which he had set up among men. And he gave his strength into captivity, and his comeliness into the hand of the adversary. And he gave his people over to the sword, and he was wrought with his inheritance. His young men were consumed by fire, and his maidens were not praised. His priests fell by the sword, and their widows could not weep. And Yahuwah awoke as one asleep, as a mighty man who shouts because of wine. And he struck his adversaries backward. He put them to an everlasting reproach. Then he rejected the tent of Joseph and did not choose the tribe of Ephraim, but chose the tribe of Yehuda, Mount Zion, which he loved. And he built his set apart place like the heights, like the earth he founded it forever. And he chose David his servant and took him from the sheepfolds. He brought him in from tending the ewes to shepherd Jacob his people and Israel his inheritance. And he shepherded them according to the integrity of his heart and led them by the skill of his hands. Oh, whoa. Oh, my goodness. Wow.
So there's a lot of interesting stuff about this chapter.
Wow.
I'm trying to see here. One of the most recent verses Sister Josie just read, which I thought was interesting, was he sent evil angels among them.
Mhm.
Now I wonder what that could be referring to. Maybe the fiery serpents he sent to them in the wilderness. You know, the fiery serpents that afflicted them. I kind of wonder, because if you look into the Hebrew seraph many times, like the prefix of seraphim is translated as fiery flying serpent. So I'm just wondering, I mean, this is kind of a reach, but I'm wondering if verse 49 here is referring to that event of the fiery serpents. Just throwing it out there. It's a possibility. Let's see here. 30, verse 38. Let's see here. I thought it was very interesting. It says, he shall atone for their sins. Now, mind you, this is talking about the Father here. And it says, he shall atone for their sins. Now, that really paints a picture in the Brit Hadashah that this is foreshadowing Yahuwah coming down from heaven as his son, taking on human flesh to die for us. That's what I get from verse 38 there in the Septuagint. He shall atone for our sins. Versus the Masoretic, I think it just says he will be compassionate and forgive their lawlessness. So that's kind of interesting. I wonder why they would want to change that. Let's see here. Verse 32, they did not trust in his wonders. That kind of brings me back to what Paul talked about is the problem. What the problem with in the original covenant was. It wasn't the covenant itself, it was the people. And of course, my eSword wants to be stupid right now. I'm trying to go to Hebrews 8:8 as a cross-reference here. All right, let me use other program then. For some reason, that particular program was being stupid. All right, here we go. If we go to, let's see here, what version do I want to use here? Let's go to Restored in King James. Go to Hebrews 8:8. Book of Hebrews, where the author of Hebrews here, whoever is speaking here, let's see, it says here, Hebrews chapter 8, verse 8. All right. It says here, for finding fault with them, he says, behold, the days come, I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel, the house of Judah, now according to the covenant I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt, because they continued not in my covenant, and I regarded them not, says Yahuwah. And I believe, I'm trying to remember where exactly in one of Paul's letters it talks about they didn't, my bad. No, well, I can't prove it's Paul's letters, but Hebrews 4 talks about this. That's what I was trying to go to, was Hebrews 4. For if verse 8 here, for if Yahusha had not given them rest, then he would not afterward have spoken of another day. And it talks about their problem was their belief, their trust was not in him, that it was not mixed with belief. And you can go to verse 6 specifically. It says, seeing therefore it remains that some must enter therein, and they to whom it was first preached enter not in because of unbelief. So Hebrews 4:6, you could connect with Psalms 78, verse 32. So, and then verse 6 and verse 7 were something stood out to me in verse 6 and verse 7 of Psalm 78, which Sister Josie just read. Let's see here. That the generation to come might know them, even the children which should be born, who should arise and declare them to their children. I thought it was interesting because it talked about teaching his commandments to their children. There's multiple scriptures that talk about teaching children the Torah and so on and so forth, and training them up in the way, or dedicating them in the way, in the book of Proverbs. And then let's see here, verse 7, that they might set their trust in Elohim and not forget the works of Elohim, but keep his commandments. So we see again, the biggest problem is they're not trusting in Yahuwah. They're not truly believing in him. And as we see here, that if they had true belief in him, they would obey his commandments. So, and that's about it. So we could go to the last chapter here of the Psalms portion, 79. And I'll let you continue, Sister Josie.
Okay, hold on one sec.
No problem.
79. Okay. Let's see. Okay. O Elohim, the nations have come into your inheritance. They have defiled your set apart Hekal. They turned Jerusalem into ruins. They have given the dead bodies of your servants as food for the birds of the heavens, the flesh of your loving committed ones to the wild beast on the earth. They have poured out their blood like water all around Jerusalem with no one to bury them. We have become a reproach to our neighbors, a scorn and a mockery to those who are around us. How long, O Yahuwah, would you be enraged forever? Would your jealousy burn like fire? Pour out your wrath on the nations who have not known you, and on reigns that have not called on your name. For they have devoured Jacob and laid waste his pasture. Do not remember against us the crookedness of the fathers. Let your compassion speedily meet us, for we have been greatly weakened. Help us, O Elohim of our deliverance, for the sake of the esteem of your name, and deliver us and cover over our sins for your name's sake. Why should the nations say, where is Elohim? Let the vengeance of the outpoured blood of your servants be known among the nations before our eyes. Let the groaning of the prisoner come before you. According to the greatness of your arm, preserve those appointed to death, and repay to our neighbors sevenfold their reproach into their bosom, which they have reproached you, O Elohim. And we, your people, the sheep of your pasture, we give thanks to you forever. From generation to generation, we show forth your praise.
Thank you, Sister Josie. Great job. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
see here. So again, he references the sheep of Yahuwah's pasture. And as I said earlier, the book of John says Yahusha is the shepherd. So we see here, this is a recurring theme in today's Haftarah reading. We are the sheep of his pasture. And so let's see here. Verse 13 was that. Verse 8 or verse 9 mentioned, let's see here. Where's the one I'm looking for? I think it's actually verse 8 here. Where it talks about, oh no, it's verse 6. Okay. Pour out your wrath upon the heathen that have not known you, and upon the kingdoms that have not called upon your name. So this is David speaking here, and he's saying those that have not chosen Yahuwah, who have either willfully, I would probably say the context would say they love being wicked and being non-believers, and they haven't chosen Yahuwah, they haven't called upon his name, or even chose to serve him, that David's saying to, telling Yahuwah to pour out his wrath upon those nations that have not called upon his name and have not chosen him. So I found that interesting. Let's see here. So then verse 9, I thought was pretty interesting in this chapter too.
Yeah.
Help us, O Elohim of our salvation, for the esteem of your name, and deliver us and purge away our sins for your name's sake. So it's interesting. It's talking about taking away our sins for his name's sake. And you can find that in multiple times in the Tanakh, in the Old Testament. So let's see here. I think we got one last portion for today. We got Acts 20 to 24. So I think, Mom, we'll probably split it up.
All right.
I'll read 2 chapters and you read 2 chapters.
Sure.
So I'll be reading from the NLT, everyone. So if anything's a little too off, just let me know. I'm reading from the New Living Translation. And so we're going to be going from Acts 20 to 24. So let's see here. Page 1050. Let's see here. Okay. All right. Timothy. All right. Let me see here. Okay. Let me make sure I got the right page here. Hold on. Bear with me, guys. Bear with me. All right. Whoops, my bad. 1095. Okay, that's why I couldn't find it. Okay. Acts chapter 20. Okay. So, here we go. Paul goes to Macedonia in Greece, and just for the heck of it, for the viewers and listeners, I'll put the compare up there. Let's see, select Bibles to compare. Aramaic on one side, and then we can do the Etheridge Syriac on the other, if I can find the Syriac here. There we go. Okay. Here we go. And then we're going to do Acts 20. Okay. Here we go. When the uproar was over, Paul sent for the believers and encouraged them. Then he said, "By and left for Macedonia." While there, he encouraged the believers in all the towns he passed through. Then he traveled down to Greece, where he stayed for 3 months. He was preparing to sail back to Syria when he discovered a plot by some Judeans against his life. So he decided to return through Macedonia. Several men were traveling with him. They were Sopater, son of Pyrrhus, from Berea, Aristarchus and Secundus from Thessalonica, Gaius from Derbe, Timothy and Tychicus and Trophimus from the province of Asia. They went on ahead and waited for us at Troas after the Passover. And there's a little asterisk there with verse 6 here. So I wonder if there's a reason. Yeah. In the Greek, it says days of unleavened bread. So the footnotes let you know here. So, okay. After the Passover ended, or the days of unleavened bread ended, we boarded a ship at Philippi in Macedonia. 5 days later, joined them in Troas, where we stayed a week. On the first day of the week, and let's see here. Now, let me just check something real quick. I have a funny feeling about this word, first day of the week. I'm wondering. Let me see here. If I go to, just curious to see, sometimes it's actually referring to the Sabbath, or one of the Sabbaths. So I just want to see something real quick. I have a funny feeling about this. Yep, supposed to say on one of the Sabbaths. Okay. On one of the Sabbaths, we gathered the local believers to share in the Master's. Let's see, in the Master's Supper, Paul was preaching to them, and in silence, he was leaving the next day. He kept talking until midnight. The upstairs room where he met was lighted with many flickering lamps. As Paul spoke on and on, a young man named Eutychus, sitting sound asleep and dropping 3 stories to death below. Paul went down and bent over him and took him into his arms. "Don't worry," he said, "he's alive." Then they all went back upstairs, shared in the Master's meal or supper, and ate together. Paul continued talking to them until dawn. Then he left. Meanwhile, the young man was taken home unhurt, and everyone was greatly relieved. Paul meets the Ephesian elders. Paul went to the land to Assos, where he had arranged for us to join him while we traveled by ship. He joined us there, and we sailed together to Mytilene. The next day, we sailed past the island of Chios, and the following day, we crossed to the island of Samos, and a day later, we arrived at Miletus. Paul had decided to sail on past Ephesus, for he didn't want to spend any more time in the province of Asia. He was hurrying to get to Jerusalem, if possible, in the time for the festival of Pentecost. Verse 17, but when we landed at Miletus, he sent a message to the elders of the assembly at Ephesus, asking them to come and meet him. When they arrived, he declared, "You know that from the day I set foot in the province of Asia until now, I have done the Master's work humbly with many tears. I have endured the trials that came to me from the plots of the Judeans. I never shrank back from telling you what you needed to hear, either publicly or in your homes. I have had one message for Judeans and Greek alike: the necessity of repenting from sin and turning to Alua, and of having belief in our Master, Yahushua Messiah. And now I am bound by the Spirit to go to Jerusalem. I don't know what awaits me, except that the set-apart Spirit tells me in city after city that jail and suffering lie ahead. But my life is worth nothing to me unless I use it for finishing the work assigned to me by the Master Yahushua, the work of telling others the glad news about the wonderful favor of Alua. And now I know that none of you to whom I have preached the kingdom will ever see me again. I declare today that I have been trustworthy. If anyone suffers eternal death, it is not my fault, for I didn't shrink from declaring all that Alua wants you to know. So guard yourselves and Alua's people, feed and shepherd Alua's flock, his assembly, purchased with his own blood." So Paul is actually saying here that the Father purchased us with his own blood, over which the set-apart Spirit has appointed you as elders. I know that false teachers like vicious wolves will come in among you, and after I leave, not sparing the flock. Well, it doesn't look like Paul's afraid of exposing people. Even some men from your own group will rise up and distort the truth in order to draw a following. Watch out. Remember the 3 years I was with you, my constant watch and care over you night and day, and my many tears for you. And now I entrust you to Alua and the message of his favor that is able to build you up and give you an inheritance with all those he has set apart for himself. I have never coveted anyone's silver or gold or fine clothes. You know that these hands of mine have those who were with me. And I have been a constant example of how you can help those in need by working hard. You should remember the words of the Master Yahusha. It is more Baruch to give than to receive. When he had finished speaking, he knelt and prayed with them. They all cried and embraced and kissed him goodbye. They were sad, most of all, because he had said that they would never see him again. Then they escorted him down to the ship. Okay, chapter 21. Paul's journey to Jerusalem. After saying farewell to the Ephesian elders, he sailed straight to the island of Kos. The next day we reached Rhodes and then went to Patara. There we boarded a ship sailing for Phoenicia. We sighted the island of Cyprus, passed it on our left, and landed at the harbor of Tyre in Syria, where the ship was to unload its cargo. We went ashore, found the local believers, and stayed with them a week. These believers prophesied through the set-apart spirit that Paul should not go on to Jerusalem. When we returned to the ship at the end of the week, the entire congregation, including women, children, left the city and came to the shore with us. There we knelt, prayed, and said our farewells. Then we went aboard and they returned home. The next stop after leaving Tyre was Ptolemais, where we greeted the brothers and sisters and stayed for one day. The next day we went on to Caesarea and stayed at the home of Philip, the evangelist, or the one that the messenger that brings good news. One of the 7 men who had been chosen to distribute food. He had 4 unmarried daughters who had the gift of prophecy. Several days later, a man named Agabus, who also had the gift of prophecy, arrived from Judea. He came over and took Paul's belt and bound his own feet and hands with it. Then he said, "The set-apart spirit declares, so shall the owner of this belt be bound by the Judean leaders in Jerusalem and turned over to the Gentiles." When we heard this, we and the local believers all begged Paul not to go on to Jerusalem. But he said, "Why all this weeping? You are breaking my heart. I am ready not only to be jailed at Jerusalem, but to even die for the sake of our master, Yahushua Messiah." When it was clear that we couldn't persuade him, we gave up and said, "The master's will be done." Paul arrives at Jerusalem. After this, we packed our bags and left for Jerusalem, and some believers from Caesarea accompanied us, and they took us to the home of Manasseh, a man originally from Cyprus and one of the early believers. When we arrived, the brothers and sisters in Jerusalem welcomed us warmly. The next day, Paul with us met with James, or Jacob, and all the elders of Jerusalem, of the Jerusalem assembly, were present after greeting him. Paul gave a detailed account of the things Alua had accomplished among the Gentiles through his ministry. After hearing this, they praised Alua, and then they said, "You know, dear brother, how many thousands of Judeans have also believed, and they all follow the law of Moshe very seriously. But the Judean believers here in Jerusalem have been told that you are teaching all the Judeans who live among the Gentiles to turn their back on the laws of Moses. They have heard that you teach them not to circumcise their children or follow other Judean customs. What should we do? And they will certainly hear that you have come. Here's what we want you to do. We have 4 men here who have completed their vow. go with them to the temple and join them in the purification ceremony, paying for them to have their heads richly shaved. Then everyone will know that the rumors are all false and that you yourself observe the Judean laws or the law of Moses. So what he's referring to here, I can only assume, is the Nazirite vow. So there's false accusations being put against Paul. Paul is, he's gonna agree to do this to show people he's not preaching against the law of Moses. As for the Gentile believers, they should do what we already told them in a letter. They should abstain from eating food offered to idols, from consuming blood or the meat of strangled animals, and from sexual morality. And this verse here is not saying that, Gentile believers only do these commandments, because you can go to Acts 15 where he originally states this, or James, whoever is the writer, originally states this same, like literally word for word statement, and then expounds and talks about they have every week to learn the law that Moses is preached every Sabbath at the synagogue. Okay, Paul is arrested, verse 26. So Paul went to the temple the next day with the other men. They had already started the purification ritual, so he publicly announced the date when their vows would end and the sacrifices would be offered. For each of them, the 7 days were almost ended when some Judeans from the province of Asia saw Paul in the temple and aroused a mob against him. They grabbed him, yelling, "Men of Yasharal, help us. This is the man who preaches against our people everywhere and tells everyone to disobey the Judean laws. He speaks against the temple and even defiles this set-apart place by bringing in Gentiles." For earlier that day, they had seen him in the city with Trophimus, a Gentile from Ephesus, and they assumed Paul had taken him into the temple. The whole city was rocked by these accusations, and the great riot followed. Paul was grabbed and dragged out of the temple, and immediately the gates were closed behind him. As they were trying to kill him, word reached the commander of the Roman regiment that all Jerusalem was in an uproar. He immediately called out his soldiers and officers and ran down among the crowd. When the mob saw the commander and the troops coming, they stopped beating Paul. Then the commander arrested him and ordered him bound with 2 chains. He asked the crowd who he was and what he had done, and some shouted one thing and some another. Since he couldn't find out the truth in all the uproar and confusion, he ordered that Paul be taken to the fortress. As Paul reached the stairs, the mob grew so violent the soldiers had lifted him to their shoulders to protect him, and the crowd followed behind, shouting, "Kill him, kill him." Paul speaks to the crowd. As Paul was about to be taken inside, he said to the commander, "May I have a word with you?" "Do you know Greek?" the commander asked, surprised. "Are you the Egyptian who led a rebellion some time ago and took 4,000 members of the assassins out in the desert?" "No," Paul replied. "I am a Judean, a citizen of Tarsus in Cilicia, which is an important city. Please let me talk to these people." The commander agreed, so Paul stood on the stairs and motioned the people to be quiet. Soon a deep silence enveloped the crowd, and he addressed them in their own language, Aramaic. Interesting. Let's see here. There's no real explanation here. Oh, okay. It says "or" in Hebrew. I guess it depends on your version of the New
Yeah, that's
Testament.
what my footnote says too.
Okay, so that's interesting. All right, here, Mom, can you take over?
Yeah,
Just read
Yeah.
22, 23, and 24.
okay. Brothers and fathers, listen now to my defense. When they heard him speak to them in Aramaic, they became very quiet. Then Paul said, "I am a Jew, born in Tarsus in Cilicia, but brought up in this city. Under Gamaliel, I was thoroughly trained in the law of our fathers and was just as zealous for Yahuwah as any of you are today. I persecuted the followers of this way to their death, arresting both men and women and throwing them into prison, as also the high priest and all the council can testify. I even obtained letters from them to their brothers in Damascus and went there to bring these people as prisoners to Jerusalem to be punished. About noon, as I came near Damascus, suddenly a bright light from heaven flashed around me. I fell to the ground and heard a voice say to me, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? Who are you, Lord? I asked. I am Yahusha of Nazareth, whom you are persecuting, he replied. My companions saw the light, but they did not understand the voice of him who was speaking to me. What shall I do, Lord? I asked. Get up, Yahusha said, and go into Damascus. There you will be told all that you have been assigned to do. My companions led me by the hand into Damascus because the brilliance of the light had blinded me. A man named Ananias came to see me. He was a devout observer of the law and highly respected by all the Jews living there. He stood beside me and said, Brother Saul, receive your sight. And at that very moment, I was able to see him. Then he said,
Elohim.
Thank you.
It's okay.
The Elohim of our fathers have chosen you to know his will and to see the righteous one and to hear words from his mouth. You will be his witness to all men of what you have seen and heard. And now what are you waiting for? Get up, be baptized, and wash your sins away, calling on his name. When I returned to Jerusalem and was praying at the temple, I fell into a trance and saw Yahuwah speaking. Quick, he said to me, leave Jerusalem immediately, because they will not accept your testimony about me. Yahuwah, I replied, these men know that I went from one synagogue to another to imprison and beat those who believe in you. And when the blood of your martyr Stephen was shed, I stood there giving my approval and guarding my clothes of those who were killing him. Then Yahuwah said to me, go, I will send you far away to the Gentiles. Paul, the Roman citizen. The crowd listened to Paul until he said this. Then they raised their voices and shouted, rid the earth of him, he's not fit to live. As they were shouting and throwing off their cloaks and flinging dust into the air, the commander ordered Paul to be taken into the barracks. He directed that he be flogged and questioned in order to find out why the people were shouting at him like this. As they stretched him out to flog him, Paul said to the centurion standing there, is it legal for you to flog a Roman citizen who hasn't even been found guilty? Paul should know that. He was a Roman citizen. When the centurion heard this, he went to the commander and reported it. What are you going to do? He asked. This man is a Roman citizen. The commander went to Paul and asked, tell me, are you a Roman citizen? Yes, I am, he answered. Then the commander said, I had to pay a big price for my citizenship, but I was born a citizen, Paul replied. Those who were about to question him withdrew immediately. The commander himself was alarmed when he realized that he had put Paul, a Roman citizen, in chains. The next day, since the commander wanted to find out exactly why Paul was being accused by the Jews, he released him and ordered the chief priests and all the Sanhedrin to assemble. Then he brought Paul and had him stand before them. Paul looked straight at the Sanhedrin and said, my brothers, I have fulfilled my duty to Yahuwah in all good conscience to this day. At this, the high priest, Ananias, ordered those standing near Paul to strike him on the mouth. Then Paul said to him, Yahuwah will strike you, you whitewashed wall. You sit there to judge me according to the law, yet you yourself violate the law by commanding that I be struck. Those who were standing near Paul said, you dare to insult Yahuwah's high priest? Paul replied, brothers, I did not realize that he was the high priest, for it is written, do not speak evil about the ruler of your people. Then Paul, knowing that some of them were Sadducees, the others Pharisees, called out in the Sanhedrin, "My brothers, I am a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee. I stand on trial because of my hope in the resurrection of the dead." When he said this, a dispute broke out between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. The Sadducees say that there is no resurrection, and that there are neither angels nor spirits, but the Pharisees acknowledge them all. There was a great uproar, and some of the teachers of the law, who were Pharisees, stood up and argued vigorously. "We find nothing wrong with this man," they said. "What if a spirit or an angel has spoken to him?" The dispute became so violent that the commander was afraid Paul would be torn to pieces by them. He ordered the troops to go down and take him away from them by force and bringing him to the barracks. The following night, Yahuwah stood near Paul and said, "Take courage. As you have testified about me in Jerusalem, so you must also testify in Rome." The plot to kill Paul. The next morning, the Jews formed a conspiracy and bound themselves with an oath not to eat or drink until they had killed Paul. More than 40 men were involved in this plot. They went to the chief priests and elders and said, "We have taken a solemn oath not to eat anything until we have killed Paul. Now then, you and the Sanhedrin petitioned the commander to bring him before you on the pretext of wanting more accurate information about this case. We are ready to kill him before he gets here." But when the son of Paul's sister heard of this plot, he went into the barracks and told Paul. Then Paul called one of the centurions and said, "Take this young man to the commander. He has something to tell him." So he took him to the commander. The centurion said, "Paul, the prisoner, sent for me and asked me to bring this young man to you because he has something to tell you." The commander took the young man by the hand, drew him aside, and asked, "What is it you want to tell me?" He said, "The Jews have agreed to ask you to bring Paul before the Sanhedrin tomorrow on the pretext of wanting more accurate information about him. Don't give in to them, because more than 40 of them are waiting in ambush for him. They have taken an oath not to eat or drink until they have killed him. They are ready now, waiting for your consent to their request." The commander dismissed the young man and cautioned him, "Don't tell anyone that you have reported this to me." Then he called 2 of his centurions and ordered them, "Get ready a detachment of 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, and 200 spearmen to go to Caesarea at 9 tonight. Provide mounts for Paul so that he may be taken safely to Governor Felix." He wrote a letter as follows: "Claudius Lysias, to His Excellency Governor Felix, greetings. This man was seized by the Jews, and they were about to kill him. But I came with my troops and rescued him, for I had learned that he is a Roman citizen. I wanted to know why they were accusing him, so I brought him to their Sanhedrin. I found that the accusations had to do with questions about their law, but there was no charge against him that deserved death or imprisonment. When I was informed of a plot to be carried out against the man, I sent him to you at once. I also ordered his accusers to present to you their case against him." So the soldiers, carrying out their orders, took Paul with them during the night and brought him as far as Antipatris. The next day they let the cavalry go on with him while they returned to the barracks. When the cavalry arrived in Caesarea, they delivered the letter to the governor and handed Paul over to him. The governor read the letter and asked what province he was from. Learning that he was from Cilicia, he said, "I will hear your case when your accusers get here." Then he ordered that Paul be kept under guard in Herod's palace. The trial before Felix. 5 days later, the high priest Ananias went down to Caesarea with some of the elders and a lawyer named Tertullus, and they brought their charges against Paul before the governor. When Paul was called in, Tertullus presented his case before Felix. "We have enjoyed a long period of peace under you, and your foresight has brought about reforms in this nation. Everywhere and in every way, most excellent Felix, we acknowledge this with profound gratitude. But in order not to weary you further, I would request that you be kind enough to hear us briefly. We have found this man to be a troublemaker, stirring up riots among the Jews all over the world. He's a ringleader of the Nazarene sect and even tried to desecrate the temple, so we seized him. By examining him yourself, you will be able to learn the truth about all these charges we are bringing against him. The Jews joined in the accusation, asserting that these things were true. When the governor motioned for him to speak, Paul replied, I know that for a number of years you have been a judge over this nation, so I gladly make my defense. You can easily verify that no more than 12 days ago I went up to Jerusalem to worship. My accusers did not find me arguing with anyone at the temple or stirring up a crowd in the synagogues or anywhere else in the city, and they cannot prove to you the charges they are now making against me. However, I admit that I worship the Yahuwah of our fathers as a following of the way, which they call a sect. I believe everything that agrees with the law and that is written in the prophets. And I have the same hope in Yahuwah as these men, that there will be a resurrection of both the righteous and the wicked. So I strive always to keep my conscience clear before Yahuwah and man. After an absence of several years, I came to Jerusalem to bring my people gifts for the poor and to present offerings. I was ceremonially clean when they found me in the temple courts doing this. There was no crowd with me, nor was I involved in any disturbance. But there are some Jews from the province of Asia who ought to be here before you and bring charges if they have anything against me. Or these who are here should state what crime they found in me when I stood before the Sanhedrin. Unless it was this one thing I shouted as I stood in their presence, it is concerning the resurrection of the dead that I am on trial before you today. Then Felix, who was well acquainted with the way, adjourned the proceedings. When Lysias the commander comes, he said, I will decide your case. He ordered the centurion to keep Paul under guard, but to give him some freedom and permit his friends to take care of his needs. Several days later, Felix came with his wife, Drusilla, who was a Jewess. He sent for Paul and listened to him as he spoke about faith in Yahushua Messiah. As Paul discoursed on righteousness, self-control, and the judgment to come, Felix was afraid and said, That's enough for now. You may leave. When I find it convenient, I will send for you. At the same time, he was hoping that Paul would offer him a bribe. So he sent for him frequently and talked with him. When 2 years had passed, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus. But because Felix wanted to grant a favor to the Jews, he left Paul in prison. The trial before Festus. 3 days.
That's
after,
it.
Oh, that's it.
It's 24. That's it.
I was on a roll there.
Yep, no problem. No problem. All right, thank you all for bearing with us today. We just finished our Haftarah reading. Finally, there was a lot of good stuff in today's portion. I pray, let me put my camera back on here. I pray that you guys got something out of it. I know I got a lot out of it today, a lot of different connections with us being Yahuwah's people, the false accusations of Paul we just read about, and how he was not even going to accept a bribe to take the easy way out, and how his fellow believers kind of did the same thing that Satan was trying to get his fellow brothers and sisters to do, what Satan got Peter to do, try to convince Yahushua not to go to the Sanhedrin. So I felt like there was like a connection there too, where Paul looked at it as, well, if our master, our savior went through all this, why am I going to try to take the easy way out? Yep, go ahead, Gibsons.
Did you also by chance see the connection between the road to Damascus where Saul is approached, right? And the cave where David could have taken out Saul for pursuing him, right? But chose not to, and instead actually turned his heart as a witness for his goodness, you know? And that's exactly the same thing that happened to Paul, where Paul or Saul, actually, just like Saul that we read about pursuing David, the future king, right? We read about him pursuing him for no good reason other than his own personal whatever, whatever the gumption comes from, and then we see him being blindsided by him coming out of a cave. He's behind him. He's like, "Hey, I'm right here," and he turns around and sees him. All of a sudden, he's like, "I could have killed you," you know what I mean? But I chose not to, because you deserve death for what you've done, basically, and that is exactly how Yahuwah is approaching Saul in this character in Damascus. I thought that was a pretty cool connection. I never saw that before.
Yeah, me neither. I've seen parallels between the apostle Shaul and Shaul the king too. Like they're both from Benjamin. I never knew that before. I never paid attention to that before reading First Samuel this year. I was like, that's interesting. So they both came from the same exact tribe. They had the same first name, and this too. So it seems like what Yahuwah caused David to do to Shaul with sparing him was like a foreshadowing to what Yahusha would do for Paul later on, as like almost like a parallel. Yeah, that's the first time I actually ever caught that. But yeah, there was a lot of stuff. I think this Torah portion was really about combining a lot of parallels, because we see Edom was constantly talked about in our whole Torah portion today. We have all the Psalms are all connected together in that portion about Yahuwah, about Israel, going against Yahuwah and constantly not fully trusting Yahuwah and belief and all that. So I feel like all these topics were kind of combined into one with this Torah portion today. About the wicked, about the the wicked not seeking Yahuwah, not wanting to want salvation from Yahuwah, and so I just thought it was a very interesting Haftarah reading today. I learned a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So and I hope all you out there learned something out there too, that's gonna see this on YouTube later, that has bared with us on Facebook Live for this long. So I pray that this was edification for all of our brothers and sisters out there. And if there's any brothers and sisters that have not found fellowship, that want to find fellowship, please reach out to our Facebook page. It's the name of our assembly, Awakened by Yahuwah. We have a Facebook page, and so you can reach out to us through my YouTube channel too, Douglas Bonham Segna. So thank you for joining us today, and to all of our brothers and sisters out there, have a great rest of your Sabbath. Shalom.
Shalom.